How can you mix or blend together the 7 white squares and the 5 black squares to form groups that have equally proportionate grouping of both black and white squares, then aligning them in lateral formation? And what is the least number of groups? Should you group them together by 2, with 1 white and 1 black in each group, forming 6 groups? But then, there is a disparity in the last pair, that, even when aligned laterally, the disparity is still reflected. Should you group them together by 3, with 1 black and 2 whites in each group, forming 4 groups? But still, there is a disparity in the last group, that even when aligned laterally, the disparity is also reflected. Should you group them together by 4, with 1 black and 3 whites in each group, forming 3 groups? The disparity is obviously in the reversal of the majority in the last group, therefore, another not equally proportionate groupings. Should you group them together by 4, with 2 whites and 2 blacks in each group, forming 3 groups? Of course, another disparity in the last group, and so, another not equally proportionate groupings. Should you group them together by 6, with 3 whites and 3 blacks in each group, forming 2 groups? Clearly, the last group is not balanced, and therefore another disparity. Evidently, another not equally proportionate groupings. And yet, the shape of the right triangle is already giving us the clue on how to divide the 7 white squares and the 5 black squares to form equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious groupings. And the clue is the shape of the triangle itself. Then, let's divide the triangle into 2. Now, we have 2 triangles. The first triangle and the second triangle. The first triangle has 2 blacks and the 3 whites with Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3. The second triangle has 3 blacks and 4 whites with numbers 4, 5, 6, and 7. Thus, we were able to divide the 7 white squares and the 5 black squares to form an equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious groupings. But still, we are not done yet. It's because we still need to align these 2 groups horizontally or laterally to form an equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious formation. Aligning and dividing the sides and resultant of the right triangle into equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious lateral formation, forming the side grouping and the base grouping, resulting to an equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious lateral formation. And even if the right triangle is converted into an equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious lateral formation, still, the lateral formation can be converted into a circular formation, with the side grouping and the base grouping obviously reflected. And yet, in this circular formation, the equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious groupings formation is not lost. Therefore, being circular, this equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious circular groupings formation is continuous and cyclical. Moreover, this circular formation can still be shaped into a right-angular formation, like a tri-square, with the side grouping and the base grouping are still reflected without losing again its equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious groupings, even in right-angular formation. This was why ancient mystic masters were already teaching the people esoteric knowledges, symbolized by the different tools used in the construction for righteous and orderly way of living, such as this tri-square. And yet, the base should be on the level with the plumb line for checking the upright standard of the sides of everything, and must be combined with the compass to inscribe circle for the perfection of everything. These tools and many more are not just used in the construction of buildings, but also even in the construction of musical instruments such as the lute, guitar, piano, organ, windpipes, flute, and so on, to produce harmonious sounds of music. Since the number 4 symbolizes stability, as in the 4 sides of the pyramid and the 4 corners of the world, mystic masters therefore emphasized that the base 4 should be the foundation for musical tunes, even in the laying out of the guitar frets and strings, as the fixed point or the starting point of guitar basic. This was why guitar strings were arranged like this. And the base 4 is at this point. This plastic wedge is called the nut. And the long wooden bar here is called the neck. This smallest diameter wire is referred to as the first string, followed by the second string, the third string, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth string, having the largest wire diameter. All the strings can be adjusted by their specific tuners. The column division in the neck is called the fret. And it is the same with the other columns. This is why all the columns in the neck are called the fretboard. However, there are fret markers in the fretboard. Since this lateral formation is also equivalent to a circular formation, therefore, in the neck, the pattern is repeated. This is why the first part of the formation is repeated on the other end of the fretboard, and each of the patterns in the formation corresponds to each fret in the fretboard. Hence, there is a continuous cycle of the lateral formation, even on the flat fretboard of the guitar. In the fretboard, there are dots as the 3rd fret marker, the 5th fret marker, the 7th fret marker, the 9th fret marker, and the fret with a double dot is the 12th fret marker. and the other end of all the strings that are fixed on another wedge is called the bridge. But take note that the first note produced in the sixth string is on the nut. But this harmonious lateral formation is also the basis for the piano or the organ. This was also why piano or organ keys were arranged like this, having the white keys and the black keys. This is why the arrangement of the keys, which is actually patterned to the harmonious lateral formation, is called the keyboard. And the pattern is repeated on the keyboard, but the number of the repetition depends on the model of the piano or organ. This is also why the numbering is also repeated, and starting from any number up to the next same number is called an octave. It's the same even if your referential lines are pointing to the center of the keys. Whether you start from a different number and going up to the next same number, it is also called an octave. Or, starting down from different number up to the same next number is also called an octave. And octave means 8 or the eighth. It's because the same next number is the eighth of the former first number. And the former first number is called the root key. And the root key can start from a different number depending on the voice range of the singer. Like for example, we could bring the root key here to the Roman numeral 5. And the number 5 becomes now the root key as the number 1. And the numbering will also change starting from the new root key. And yet, take note that the number 7 now falls on the black key. But why? It's because an octave actually consists of 12 keys of black and white colors. And octave is also called scale, which means the incrementing or decrementing, or the rising or falling of the notes. That is why an octave, in fact, is composed of 12 notes of a scale. Therefore, you should always remember that there are in reality 12 notes in every octave, and we obtained these 12 notes from the total units of the lateral or circular formation, which were derived from the right triangle having the least whole single-digit numbers of both sides, the number 3 and the number 4, which are equal to 7, having then the resultant as the number 5, totaling 12 units in all. Ancient mystic masters were already teaching that these numbers 3, 4, 5, 7, and 12 are the major numbers in the rudiments of music, as they are also among the patterns observed in the world of man, such as the three major roles or manifestations of the one and only Creator, known as the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, the three stages of time, which are the past, present, and future, the three major subatomic particles, known as the proton, neutron, and electron, the three stages of man, which are birth, life, and death, etc., the four sacred ends of the cross, the four mystical corners of the world, the four physical directions of the earth, which are the north, south, east, and west, the four major invisible forces in nature, which are the gravitational, electromagnetic, weak, and strong forces, the four forms of the apocalyptic seraphim, with faces of lion, ox, eagle, and man, etc., the seven cosmological stages of the creation, the 7 days in a week, the seven heavens or the seventh heaven, the seven underworlds, the seven major Roy G. Bibb colors of the rainbow, etc., the five components of a man, which are the heart, mind, soul, body, and spirit, the five universal elements, which are the earth, wind, fire, water, and space, the five states of matter, which are the solid, gas, plasma, liquid, and the dark thing known as dark matter or dark energy, the five-pointed symmetrical star-shaped petals of many flowers, the five basic physical senses of a man, the 5 fingers in each limb of today's species of man, etc., the 12 hours in a clock, the 12 months in a year, the 12 constellations, the 12 apostles of Jesus, the 12 major disciples of other ancient genuine masters, etc. This is why music also contains all these numbers, such as the 7 Roman numeral numbering, which are perceptively in alignment or congruent to the 12 Hindu-Arabic numbers. But the 7 Roman numeral numbering, which is commonly referred to as the 7 Western scale note numerals that align to the 12 Hindu-Arabic numbers, actually correspond to the 12 notes numbering of a scale. This is why you must be seeing the scale also in the very ancient 12 notes numbering rather than thinking of them only as the 7 notes of a scale, which was popularized only way back in the 11th century by a Western European monk who was the leader of their choir in their monastery, introducing then, from the root key, the chanting of the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then the higher next do, changing the 7 Roman numerals to the 7 letters of the alphabet. That Western monk choir leader at that time started the letter A in the middle octave because Western Europeans at that time learned the ancient custom in Asia regarding the metallic tuning bowl that when the bowl is rubbed with another metal, it produces a sound that corresponds to the sound of the middle A on the Roman numeral 6. And as it was practiced by those mystics in those ancient times, the frequency of the sound from the bowl produced healing power as well as activating the psychic centers of a person. but the frequency of the ancient A is 432 Hz as adopted by the classical musicians such as Vivaldi, Bach, Handel, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, and so on, while the frequency of the modern middle A is 440 Hz. This was because, in 1955, the International Organization for Standardization (ISO) implemented the 440 Hz as the official standard pitch for tuning the middle A, known as ISO 16 or the A4. Actually, ISO just pursuantly followed the agreed recommendation of an international conference held in London in 1939, attended by the manufacturers of musical instruments and concert musicians as well as other concert performers to standardize the deviating pitches used by the different manufacturers around the world, especially for piano and organ, and even by the concert musicians themselves, to the 440 Hz middle A. But this agreed recommendation was not pursued due to the eruption of the Second World War that people became busy for important matters produced by the war. And yet, this conference's recommendation, in fact, just copied the adoption of 440 Hz by the American music industries in 1925 as the pitch reference for tuning the middle A, which was the result of the endorsements of the American Federation of Musicians in 1917. Be that as it may, you must always see every octave and think of it to be consisting of 12 notes and not just the 7 notes of the do, re, mi, or the 7 letters from A to G. Besides, the ancient Greek made use of more than the 7 letters in their music. But because of the friction between the Western European Latin-speaking people, which was based in Rome, and the Eastern European Greek-speaking people, the Western Europeans wanted to Romanize everything, including music. Unfortunately, their friction for several centuries finally led to their Great Schism in 1054 AD. At any rate, since the origin of the black keys came from the resultant of the right triangle accidentally falling into this equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious lateral formation, therefore, all these black keys are called accidentals. If the melody of the notes is scaling up, which means from left to right, and falling into a black key, then that black key is the sharpened note of the preceding white key. For example, scaling up from the key of Roman numeral 5 to the next black key, this next black key becomes then the sharpened note of the Roman numeral 5, which is symbolized by a sharp sign. But if the melody of the notes is scaling down, which means from right to left, and falling into the same black key coming from the succeeding higher white key Roman numeral 6, then the same black key is a flattened note of the succeeding higher white key Roman numeral 6, which is symbolized by a flat sign. And so, this same black key, sharp of Roman numeral 5, becomes now the flat of the Roman numeral 6. And this is the same with all the other black keys, such that the first black key, sharp of Roman numeral 1, is the same flat key of the Roman numeral 2. The second black key, sharp of Roman numeral 2, is the same flat key of the Roman numeral 3. The third black key, sharp of Roman numeral 4, is the same flat key of the Roman numeral 5. And the fourth black key, sharp of Roman numeral 5, which we have just talked about, is the same flat key of the Roman numeral 6. And lastly, the fifth black key, sharp of Roman numeral 6, is the same flat key of the Roman numeral 7. These sharps and flats are the same with the guitar. In fact, the guitar was invented earlier than the piano or organ. And the guitar was patterned from the ancient lute, which were both patterned from the esoteric teachings of the ancient mystic masters. This was why guitars were the first to be arranged like this, then the piano or organ. And reading the scale is the same as reading the guitar frets. And the pattern is just repeated in the fretboard, along the neck, and is continued to the last frets of that string, seeing them as an octave or a scale, or as the 12 notes of a scale. That's why it is just repeating the same up to the last fret of the string. But the fret numbering starts on the first column after the nut as first fret up to the last column, depending on the model of the guitar. And you can quickly determine the number of any fret by taking notice of the fret markers, such that the first dot marker from the nut is the 3rd fret. The second dot marker is the 5th fret. The third dot marker is the 7th fret. The fourth dot marker is the 9th fret. And the double dot marker is the 12th fret. And yet, do not be confused with the fret numbering and the scale numbering. They are entirely different, although the first note of an octave or a scale could coincide with the first fret numbering. But here, the start of the scale of an open string, which is on the nut of the 6th string, should be considered as the root key of this open string. And an open string means there is no finger pressing that string when plucked or strummed. Since the note on the nut is the first note of this open 6th string, therefore, it must now be considered as the first Roman numeral 1 of that string. And so, we must also look at it as the white key Roman numeral 1 of an octave or a scale. And we will just continue this octave or scale even on the next string. But what note should start on the next string? that is, on the nut of the fifth string? This is why we should understand the teaching of the ancient mystic masters, such as Pythagoras, who, being a philosopher and a mathematician in our recorded history, explained things regarding the right triangle as symbol for righteousness, which when rearranged in an equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious lateral formation, becomes the basis for an octave or a scale in music. But even if we just count all these white keys of the Roman numerals 1 to 7, still we see the octave or scale as 12 notes. But what note should really start on the nut of the fifth string? Should it be the continuation of the number found on the last fret of the sixth string? But the last fret of the guitar differs in every model of the guitar manufactured, and so it is not a good idea choosing that answer. But then again, should it be the next note after the fret 12, which is the black key, after the Roman numeral 1? But a black key is not a standalone note because the note of the black key is only dependent on the white key that precedes it. And the black key changes its name depending on the direction, whether going up or down the scale. And so, it is not also a good idea. Once again, should it be the same note of fret 12, which is the same Roman numeral 1? Therefore, making the same numbering of keys on the fifth string with that of the sixth string, repeating them in the fourth string, third string, second string, until the first string. But that idea is not technically feasible for the wire manufacturers in producing those required wires to generate all the desired sounds on every string. It's all because music is not only about art, mathematics, and sacred geometry, but also about science, engineering, technology, metallurgy, if metal wires are to be used, and chemistry, if nylon wires are to be used, and that there should be the proper strength of materials in the produced wires to be used. Otherwise, these wires would easily break. If all these factors are not taken into consideration, the thin wires of the first, second, and third strings will not last long, especially the first string, in the continuous beating of the string, whether it be by strumming or by plucking. Besides, it's not practical for the fingers to be doing all the jumping on the fretboard that is not in front of you or not facing you, not like the piano or organ keyboard fronting you, especially when changing to different octaves with the keys found on both extremes. Like for example, it will take long time jumping from the Roman numeral 7 in the first octave that is on the fret 11 of 6th string to the Roman numeral 2 sharp in the second octave which is on the fret 3 of the 5th string or vice versa, producing a noticeable and unsuitable silent gap between the sound during the travel of the hand. However, many guitarists will immediately say that the note on the nut of the 5th string is the same note on the 5th fret of the 6th string. But why? And yet, many learned guitarists from the School of Music will instantly say, it's because it's the perfect fourth. But why again is it called perfect fourth? Unfortunately, none of those who had formal studies of music whom we have talked to could explain, just as many of them said that it was just the way it was taught in the School of Music. Perfect fourth, perfect fifth, in the circle of fourth, or in the circle of fifth. This is all because many of their teachers in the School of Music thought that those technical and geometrical things we have been discussing earlier are separate topics from music. Therefore, they are not talking anymore about science, physics, mathematics, and sacred geometry in their study of music. Or maybe they are ignorant of these things, especially the sacred geometry, thinking that music is only an art. On the other hand, ancient mystic masters, who were also philosophers and mathematicians, did not separate music from their esoteric teachings. They even explained things in music using mathematics and sciences. This was why, even in our recorded history, Pythagoras, who was a known philosopher and mathematician, was linked to music. He was even among those ancient mystics who already taught those basic topics of sound, vibration, frequencies, etc., even without using sophisticated electronic equipment in their times. Those ancient mystic masters even in Asia were already teaching that any sound, which is an invisible energy, vibrates in its own specific frequency, moving like wave in its spherical cycle. And cycle is related to circle. This is because sound wave from any source travels 360 degrees spherically as expanding series of pulsating spheres, and not really in a wave line form only, popularly known as sine wave. Those mystics could perceive the frequency of the sound through their ears as if seeing them even without oscilloscope. And they could demonstrate the sound wave even in other cyclic form. It's because not all representations of the invisible wave of the sound are in sine wave form only. And they already knew that the invisible wave of the sound can also be imagined in a series of pulsating form. This is why, through their explanation, we could understand now the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth, as well as the circle of fourth and circle of fifth, and how the chords were all derived, and why they chose the perfect fourth as the same note on the nut of the fifth string. And the reason goes like this. Since an octave or a scale is considered as one whole of all the 12 notes, although already divided by 12, it can still be therefore represented by a single pulse that has no division, being a one whole. And since there are still 11 parts within the octave itself, therefore, an octave can be further divided by every number of the other parts, such that it can be divided by 11, by 10, by 9, by 8, by 7, by 6, by 5, by 4, by 3, and by 2. And so, we can now divide the whole octave by 2, just as the black note numbered 1 sharp has the frequency of 2 pulses, followed by dividing by 3 that corresponds to the frequency of white note numbered 2. Then further dividing by 4 that corresponds to the pulses of the black note numbered 2 sharp. Then, dividing by 5 for the white note numbered 3 as its pulses. Then, continue dividing by 6 to correspond to the 6 pulses of the white note numbered 4. And dividing by 7 will fall into the 7 pulses of the black note numbered 4 sharp. And dividing by 8 is the same pulses of the white note numbered 5, followed by dividing by 9 for the pulses of the black note numbered 5 sharp. And dividing by 10 is the same pulses produced in the white note numbered 6, which is known as the relative minor note of the root major note numbered 1. We will discuss more, in a bit later, the relation of this relative minor note to its root major note, why every white note numbered 6 from any root major note is called the relative minor note of that root note. Meanwhile, dividing by 11 is the pulses produced in the black note numbered 6 sharp. Then the white note numbered 7 is the same with all the other 12 parts of the whole, that is, that every single pulse is the 1/12th part of the whole. But dividing by 12 is not the way you should think of the pitch sound of each note, that you can just add 1/12th from the preceding note every time you go up the scale, or subtract 1/12th when going down. On the other hand, these pulses of the invisible sound waves of all the notes in an octave were already understood by the ancient mystic masters, even without the use of sophisticated electronic equipment, such as the oscilloscope. It was all because of their knowledge of the sacred geometry in all the creations of the Creator. That is also why, even if we continue placing another series of wave in pulsating form in the division of 12, the illustration of the geometric pattern in an octave that those ancient mystic masters gave is also this same logarithmic graph that we have already shown here. But do not be confused with these 12 divisions for all these 12 notes of an octave to that of the frequency of each note, because they are not the same. That is why you cannot just add or subtract every time the 1/12th frequency of an octave to the last note in going up or down the next note, because the pattern of an octave is exponential or logarithmic. And since it is logarithmic, therefore, each note is the 12 root of 2 higher than the preceding note, which is about 1.059463 higher, thereby increasing or decreasing exponentially. If you want to know more about logarithm, we advised you to exert again your own effort to research this topic in mathematics so that this topic will become part of you. On the other hand, since the author of this video is a licensed mechanical engineer, he already knows this thing. And so, the frequencies of the 12 notes in the middle octave, which were determined by modern sophisticated electronic equipment, are the following, by which all the other notes in the musical instruments are all based now in the middle A frequency of 440 Hz in going higher or lower than the middle A. And the total number of octaves in the grand piano used in concerts are 7 octaves, with the frequencies of each C note are the following Hz. Having all these things in mind, it is therefore also for all these reasons that we can say that those sound frequencies were already understood by those ancient mystic masters, even without the use of sophisticated electronic equipment. In fact, there is really nothing new in this world that this modern generation can say they are the best or the advanced generation. It's because all those things were already here before us, even in the forgotten pasts. This was why an ancient Hebrew mystic master by the name of King Yadadiah, putting his alias as the preacher in his writing, which now became part of the Holy Scripture of the West, said that there is really nothing new in this world because all things were already here to teach us. Whatever has been will be again, whatever has been done will be done again. It's because there is really nothing new in this world. Is there anything which you can say, this is new? No, it was already here a long time ago. It was already here in the ages before us, before our time. There is no memory of the past, nor those who are still to come will not also be remembered by those who will follow next. The Preacher, chapter 1 verses 9 to 11. He also said at first that whatever happens now or can still happen next had already happened before, because it is the Creator who makes the same thing happens all over again. The Preacher, chapter 3 verse 15 or chapter 2 verse 12. That's why even history repeats itself. It's because there will always be the repetitions of things, the same pattern of events, the manifestations of natural and sacred geometrical patterns in everything. This is why even the prayer of the largest Western religious organization affirms the phrase, world without end, Amen. In Latin, they say it as, secula seculorum, Amen. And these repetitions of sacred geometrical patterns also include music. But let us put the label marker of the octave at the bottom of this logarithmic graph to emphasize more the importance of the sacred geometry in music, which those ancient mystic masters and even today's mystics were already teaching, so that if we draw red straight lines vertically on the divisions of all the keys, they will all become perfect straight lines perpendicularly. Then, let's mark an X on both ends below to represent that they are both the terminals of every note, in which the left X mark of every note is where the yellow curved line is coincidentally intersecting the red line of each note division at the starting point of its pulse, and the other end of every note is where the other end point of its pulse is intersecting the yellow vertical line as its right X mark. And the left X to the right X of each note corresponds to the pitch frequency of each note. And so, having understood this pitch frequency of its note, let us remove all our yellow marker, which are the yellow logarithmic curve line, the yellow small circles, and the yellow vertical line. And then, let's put a 0 after the white note numbered 1 below, because its red line does not intersect any end of any pulse. Then, a number 1 below, after the first black note numbered 1 sharp, because its red line touches only one end of either pulse. And a number 2 after the white note numbered 2, because its red line touches the two ends of either pulse. A number 3 after the black note numbered 2 sharp, because its red line intersects the three ends of the pulses. A 0 again after the white note numbered 3, because there is no intersection of the red line on any end of the pulses. Then, a number 5 after the white note numbered 4, because its red line intersects 5 ends of the pulses. A 0 again after the black note, since there is no intersection at all. A number 3 marker after the white note numbered 5, since there are 3 intersections that occurred. A number 2 for the black note numbered 5 sharp, since it has 2 intersections. Another number 1 after the white note numbered 6, because of only one intersection. And lastly, another 0 after the black note numbered 6 sharp, because an intersection does not occur. Moreover, let's mark a red X at the intersection on the column of the dependent black note numbered 1 sharp, since it is not a standalone note. We call all those black notes not a standalone note because their identifications depend on their preceding note, whether in going up or down the scale ladder. Then again, marking with red X on all the intersections on the column of dependent black note numbered 2 sharp, since again it is not a standalone note. And then, also mark with a red X on the 2 intersections on the column of the dependent black note numbered 5 sharp as another not a standalone note. Likewise, let's also mark with a red X on the summation numbers of all those black notes below, because they are all dependent notes only, as well as mark also a red X on all the zeros below. Then, highlight all the intersections of the white notes on the columns. And then, eliminate all the unnecessary zeros below and the mark numbers and excess of all the black notes below, as well as all the mark red excess intersections on the columns of the dependent black notes. They are eliminated because, as said earlier, those black notes are not standalone notes. Then, highlight the 2 intersections on the column of white note numbered 2, marking also its summation number 2 below with a star, to suggest that the white note numbered 2 is a 2-star note. Then, highlight also all the intersections on the column of white note numbered 4, marking also below the number 5 with a star, to suggest that the white note numbered 4 is a 5-star note. Then, highlight also the 3 intersections on the column of the white note numbered 5, marking likewise the summation number 3 below with a star, to suggest that the white note numbered 5 is a 3-star note. And lastly, highlight the solo intersection on the column of the white note numbered 6, marking also below at the summation number 1 with a star, to suggest that the white note numbered 6 is a 1-star note. Then, let's list them on the right side in a descending order according to the number of stars, suggesting in the list that they are all perfect alignment of those white notes in an octave. This is why we now have the perfect fourth with 5 stars, the perfect fifth with 3 stars, the perfect second with 2 stars, and lastly, the perfect sixth with a 1 star. Although the white note numbered 6 has the least number of intersection, with only 1 in the vertical alignment, it has however the greatest number of intersections in the horizontal alignment, with a total of 3 intersections horizontally, followed then by the white note numbered 4 with the maximum number of 2 intersections in the horizontal alignment, thereby discounting its solo intersections of its side horizontally, and lastly the maximum horizontal solo intersections of the white note numbered 5. Therefore, as compared to the rest of the highlighted horizontal groupings, the white note numbered 6 becomes then the relative minor note of the root major note numbered 1. The significance of these relative minor notes in relationship to their major root notes is in fact one of the expressions of the reversing principle of duality in nature, in people, or in all things that can even be found in music. And ancient Asian mystic masters symbolized this dualistic principle in nature with the yin and yang emblem. And some examples of these reversing principle of duality in all things are the existence of light and darkness, hot and cold, good and evil, strong and weak, male and female, Adam and Eve, Samson and Delilah, Anthony and Cleopatra, King of England and his commoner wife, hard and soft, happy and sad, and so on. And we can find this truth also in music, such that when the pitch sound of a song starts in the root major note of any key, you can sense that the song is in a happy mood. This is why, if you will become perceptive to this dualistic principle in the creation, you will find that the song that starts in the root major note expresses joyfulness, gleefulness, cheerfulness, blissfulness, happiness, in a jubilant or exuberant tune. This is also why you can discern this mood in many merry and festive songs, conveying the uplifting, hopeful, bright, and sunny temperament, even in the upbeat marching tune in the parade, that are usually in fast tempo and are described as positive and lively, which makes you feel good. But when the pitch sound of a song starts in the relative minor note of a root major note in any key, you can sense that the song then expresses melancholic tunes, sorrowful laments, mournful chants, miserable ballads, tragic hymns that are even used in horror movies, because the tune of the song can be described as in a sad, gloomy, depressing, tragic, woeful, or despairing mood. On the other hand, since the ancient mystic masters understood those sacred geometrical patterns in nature, and since the white note numbered 4 is the perfect fourth of the preceding major root note, with a 5-star ranking, having the greatest number of intersections vertically, therefore, those ancient mystic masters already determined the significance of the perfect fourth and advised the people, then and now, that it is the basis in choosing what note should start and be placed on the nut of the 5th string. Do not forget that the guitar strings were arranged like this, with the perfect fourth as the bass that started on the 1st fret of the fretboard. But since the start of an octave can be shifted to any note, and the new octave will start on the nut of the open 6th string as the new root note of the octave, therefore, the Roman numeral 1 will also start on the nut of the 6th string. Then, its perfect fourth falls on the 5th fret of the 6th string. And the perfect fourth of the 6th string will now become the basis of the note on the nut of the 5th string as the new root note of the new octave. And its perfect fourth falls on the 5th fret of the 5th string. In the same way, this new perfect fourth will become the basis of the new note to start on the nut of the 4th string. Then the perfect fourth of the 4th string also falls on its 5th fret. And it is also in the same way in the 3rd string. But when the same pattern was repeated on both 2nd and 1st strings, the inventor of the guitar encountered an unavoidable problem. And that is, the 1st string did not always last long on the constant beating when playing the guitar, whether by strumming or plucking. Therefore, the 1st string was always broken when playing. Always remember that music is also about engineering, to study the strength of materials of the wires to be used in the guitar and the technology to produce those wires, whether by metallurgy, if metallic wires are to be used, or by chemistry, if nylon wires are to be used. And it was hard to produce a very thin wire for the 1st string that can endure the constant beating during strumming or plucking. And so, the solution to this problem was that the inventor instead lowered the adjustment on the 2nd string to align the note on the nut to the note of the 4th fret of the 3rd string, thereby reducing the stress on both 2nd and 1st strings, most particularly on the very thin wire of the 1st string. Therefore, the note on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string becomes the same note of the 5th fret of the 3rd string. However, the note on the nut of the 1st string is still the same perfect fourth of the root note on the 2nd string. But why is the note now colored white? As the same color with the root note on the 6th string. And to understand why they are in the same color is to remember that the pattern of an octave is the same arrangement we have in the circular formation. It's because the repetition of an octave is a cycle, as in a circle. Instead of representing the circular formation in units of squares, let us represent them in smaller circles. And to easily see the pattern, let us therefore separate them by lines. Then, let's start with the color white as the same color of the note on the nut of the 6th string. Then, let's count the pattern of the perfect fourth as in the lateral formation. Hence, we arrive at the same color of the perfect fourth of the open 6th string. Then again, let's count the perfect fourth starting with this lavender color, and we will have the green color of the perfect fourth in the 5th string. Likewise, if we will start on the green color of the note on the nut of the 4th string and start counting for the perfect fourth, we will arrive on the pink color of the perfect fourth of the 4th string. but since there is already an adjustment made in both second and first strings, lowering one note to reduce the wire stress, particularly on the first string, therefore, when the counting begins on the pink color, there should also be emphases on both the perfect fourth and third notes of the third string, as the same consecutive notes that should start on the nut of the second string. And so, the start of the counting on the nut of the second string should be on the same orange color, after lowering the adjustment to a one note on both first and second strings. Henceforth, the perfect fourth of the second string, which is colored white, should also be the starting note on the nut of the open first string, just as it is also the same color white of the starting note on the nut of the sixth string of the previous octave. It is for this reason that, in arriving again on the previous white color on the nut of the sixth string, which is the starting note of the preceding octave, we are therefore repeating again the same white color note in its circular formation, making the color of the note on the nut of the open first string to be also a white color. And this is all because an octave is repeated in a cycle, like a circle. And so, the perfect fourth of the open first string is the same with the perfect fourth of the open sixth string. Again, this is entirely because the scale of the note of an octave is a repetitive cycle, as in a circle. This is why the pattern of notes on the sixth string is entirely the same with the pattern of notes in the first string. That if we put a dark teal color after the white color in the circular formation, it will also be the same after the white color on the first and sixth strings. Then, a dark lavender color on the third note will be the same on the second fret of both sixth and first strings. Then, a light lavender on the fourth note will be the same on the third fret of both first and sixth strings. A light blue color on the fifth note will be the same on the fourth fret of both strings. Then, the perfect fourth as the sixth note in the circular formation is the same note on the fifth fret of both sixth and first strings. The red color of the seventh note will be the same red color of the note on the sixth fret of both sixth and first strings. And the eighth and ninth notes on the circular formation correspond to the seventh and eighth frets of both sixth and first strings. Since the whole fretboard is not shown here, we can however continue putting the other notes on the strings by looking on the pattern of our circular formation. Like for example, after the color purple note in the circular formation, we can find the red, orange, and yellow color notes. And so, let's just copy the pattern and paste them on the fretboard. In the same way, after the color pink note in the circular formation, it is followed by the blue, purple, and red colors of the notes. Likewise, let's copy and paste them also after every pink note on the fretboard. In the same way, for all those that preceded the pink note in the circular formation, let's also copy and paste them on the fretboard. Therefore, we now know that after the white colored note are these colored notes. And so, let us copy and paste them also on the fretboard. Since we have not completed yet all the coloring of the notes in the circular formation, let's then put colors on them. Now, we can check all the missing notes on the fretboard and just follow the sequencing of all the colored 12 notes in the circular formation, then copy and paste all those missing colored notes also on the fretboard. But remember that the Roman numeral 1, which is the root note of a given scale, can be shifted to any color note in the circular formation depending on the voice range of the singer. Like for example, the voice range of the singer must start on the yellow color note as the new root note after determining it through the synchronization of the voice of the singer with the accompaniment of a guitar or piano organ keyboard when scaling up and down all the notes of the octave up to the next higher octave and so on. And the voice range of any singer is wherever the lowest note and the highest note that the singer could reach. This is why even the arrangement of the numbering of the notes in the circular formation should also be shifted such that the Roman numeral 1 should start on the yellow color root note and the sequencing of the numbering should also be followed. And this is also why the numbering of the notes on the fretboard should also follow the same sequencing where the root note is already determined on the Roman numeral 1. And so, you should also be able to perceive in the fretboard all the succeeding Roman numeral 2, as well as the Roman numeral 3, and then the Roman numeral 4, and then the Roman numeral 5, and then the Roman numeral 6, as well as the Roman numeral 7, reverting then all the labels are in the fretboard as Roman numeral 1, and putting then together all at once the corresponding numerals of all the black notes in the circular formation to the other unlabeled colors in the fretboard. Since the purpose of the color coding done in the circular formation is only for the easy sequencing of all the notes in the fretboard for their repetition in every string, but since the fretboard now looks too messy due to all the colors coding done and became rather too confusing, it is therefore better to adopt the black and white colors we have on our circular or lateral formation to the guitar fretboard, likened to the black and white keys in the piano or organ keyboard. Then, at first, practice the scaling up the octave in the guitar fretboard to start on the Roman numeral 1 on the 5th string at 3rd fret up to the Roman numeral 1 on the 2nd string on its fret number 1. Then, scale down again back to the previous Roman numeral 1 on the 5th string. Then, scale up again to the same Roman numeral 1 and continue extending the scaling up to the next octave in the fretboard up to the last Roman numeral 1. Then scale down back again to the previous octave on the root note Roman numeral 1 on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. You can also practice the scaling up and down the octave on the midrange frets. Like for example, start again on the same root note Roman numeral 1 and do the scaling up and down in the other ranges of the fretboard. Then, try again in different directions, according to your own discretion, the scaling up and down the octaves, starting with all the other Roman numeral 1 as your starting root note, just as long as the sequential pattern of the notes is done in the proper order. This practice is necessary because the mastery of the notes in the fretboard is needed if you are planning to do the one-note melodic playing, as in the classical music, or the riffing and licking in the rock and modern music. But still, you must train your mind seeing instantly on the fretboard both the 12 notes numbering and the 7 Western Roman numerals of a scale or an octave. Moreover, due to the strong musical tradition in Western Europe that started in the 11th century, which had an enormous influence on the musical world today, the 7 Roman numerals were changed to the 7 letters of the alphabet, which starts the letter A in the Roman numeral 6 of the middle octave, which is now called the middle A, or the A4 in the ISO notation. The reason for those Western Europeans at that time to start on the middle A was that they learned that the sound of the middle Roman numeral 6 was the same sound which they heard produced by a mystical bowl used by the ancient mystics from Asia for their transcendent ceremonies for activating the psychic centers of a person as well as for healing. But this ancient middle A tuning has the frequency of 432 Hz, while in this modern generation the frequency of the middle A became 440 Hz. Consequently, the Roman numeral 7 became the letter B, and the Roman numeral 1 became the letter C, while the Roman numeral 2 became the letter D. Then, the Roman numeral 3 became the letter E, and the Roman numeral 4 became the letter F, while finally, the Roman numeral 5 became the letter G, with all the letters were chanted since then as Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, and back to Do. And so, we can now change all the Roman numeral 1 in the fretboard to the letter C, and all the Roman numeral 2 to the letter D, then, all the Roman numeral 3 to the letter E, while all the Roman numeral 4 to the letter F, and all the Roman numeral 5 to the letter G, while all the Roman numeral 6 to the letter A, and finally, all the Roman numeral 7 to the letter B. And you can chant now the Do, Re, Mi, while consecutively pressing the corresponding letters on the fretboard, starting again from our previous root note letter C on the 3rd fret of the 5th string as the Do, scaling up and down the octave on the fretboard to the next octave and back again to the former octave. Then, try practicing the Do, Re, Mi in scaling up and down to different directions and frets region as long as they are in the correct sequences. And since we started our preceding scaling practices from the root note of C as our Do, therefore it is called the key of C. And yet, you should also practice starting from different keys as your new root note, that is, as your new Do, whereby you are then changing to a different key. Like for example, try starting this time on the 3rd fret of the 6th string, that is, the letter G, which now becomes your new Do, as your new root note that you are now in the key of G. Then, proceed sounding the letter A as our new Re in the Roman numeral 2, then, followed by the letter B as our new Mi in the Roman numeral 3, which is also on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, and then, followed by the letter C as our new Fa in the Roman numeral 4, which is on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, then, followed by the letter D as our new Sol in the Roman numeral 5, which is on the 5th fret of the 5th string, then, followed by the letter E as our new La in the Roman numeral 6, which is on the 2nd fret of the 4th string. And yet, you cannot use next the letter F, which is always adjacently next to the letter E in this sequence, because it now falls on the Roman numeral 6 sharp. This is why we must jump on the letter F sharp as your new T, which corresponds to the Roman numeral 7 in the sequential pattern of the lateral or circular formation. And then, back to the note Do in our lateral or circular formation. And yet, it is the Do in the next higher octave of the fretboard. And we will just repeat the sequence until we reach the next higher Do, which is the letter G on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Then, scale down again until you reach the root note Do on the first letter G on the 6th string as our original root note. But do not ever forget that, in scaling down the octaves, the note F sharp must still be read as note F sharp so that there will still be complete sequence of the musical letters in an octave. It is also because the note F sharp here is not anymore an accidental note in itself, but rather, it is already a white note or a white key on the Roman numeral 7. We will discuss later more situations like this in the other musical keys that retain their sharp or the flat names of the notes, whether in going up or down the scale. But when you practice all the scaling up and down the octaves of the different keys as your root note, and if your scaling is done in the proper sequential order of the do, re, mi, or the 7 Roman numerals in an octave, you will find that the key of C is the only key that has no sharp nor flat note in all the white keys of the 7 Roman numerals, whether in scaling up or down the octave. Remember that, although the accidental notes that fall on the black-colored keys are called sharp notes when going up the scale and are called flat notes when going down the scale, still, in the different musical keys, the sharp notes may again be called sharps notes even when going down the scale, or the flat notes may again be called flat notes even when going up the scale, only if those sharp or flat notes fall into the white-colored keys of the 7 Roman numerals, depending on what musical key the music is played. This is why you will find that the key of G has one sharp note, which is the F sharp, that remains F sharp note even when going down the scale, because the F sharp note is not anymore an accidental note since it falls on the colored white note within the Roman numeral 7. The key of D has two sharp notes, whether in going up or down the scale, which are the F sharp note and the C sharp note. And that both notes remain F sharp note and C sharp note respectively, even when going down the scale, because they are not any more accidental notes, but are rather the colored white notes that are within the Roman numerals 3 and 7, respectively. In similar manner, the key of A has 3 sharp notes, which are the F sharp note, the C sharp note, and the G sharp note, in which all 3 notes remain the same sharp notes even when going down the scale. The key of E has 4 sharp notes, which are the F sharp note, the C sharp note, the G sharp note, and the D sharp note, which are also all the same 4 sharp notes even when going down the scale. Although the key of B has 5 sharp notes, whether going up or down the scale, which are the F sharp note, the C sharp note, the G sharp note, the D sharp note, and the A sharp note, still, you must realize that the key of B, in its alternate name, key of C flat, has also 7 flat notes. This is because, besides the obvious equivalent flat notes of these sharp notes, the note B, as the root note, is also called in its alternate name as C flat note, and the note E becomes its alternate name F flat note. In this way, we will still have the complete sequential order of the musical letters, starting from the C flat note, D flat note, E flat note, F flat note, G flat note, A flat note, and the B flat note. It is also for this same reason that, although the key of F sharp has 6 sharp notes, which are the F sharp note, C sharp note, G sharp note, D sharp note, A sharp note, and the E sharp note, still, the key of F sharp, in its alternate name, the key of G flat, has 6 flat notes, though they are not all exactly on the same spot as with their sharp notes. And they are the B flat note, E flat note, A flat note, D flat note, G flat note, and the C flat note. But still, take note thoughtfully that the E sharp note is reverted to its original name of F note. This is all because there cannot be a sharp note in the key of C flat, and that retaining the name E sharp note would have a repetition of the letter E and a missing letter F. On the other hand, the key of C sharp has 7 sharp notes, which are the F sharp note, C sharp note, G sharp note, D sharp note, A sharp note, E sharp note, and the B sharp note. But take notice attentively again that when the key of C sharp is in its alternate name, that is, the key of D flat, it now has 5 flat notes, which are the B flat note, the E flat note, the A flat note, the D flat note, and the G flat note. Correspondingly, the B sharp note is reverted to its original name of C note to avoid using the same musical letter B in both white-colored notes at the Roman numerals 6 and 7, and to have no sharp notes in the key of D flat. Moreover, the note E sharp is back again to its original name of F note, since there should be no sharp notes in the key of D flat. Nevertheless, always bear in mind the presence of the 12 notes numbering of the scale that corresponds to the 7 Roman numerals of an octave that we now chant with the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Although the 7 letters of the alphabet may shift to start with whatever musical letter of the key the music has as their root note, still, the 7 Roman numerals, the 7 musical letters, and the do, re, mi, that are all aligned to the 12 notes numberings, will also all be shifting at the same time. Having understood all these things, take note again that all these patterns of the numbers of sharps can be found also in the sheet music using 5 lines known as the staff, which originally came from the 5 staves. And staves are small diameter wooden poles or sticks. Ancient mystic masters used the 5 staves for illustrating these musical notes because in those times, paper was still scarce and was not easily available in the remote places where the masters and his disciples had their sessions of esoteric teachings. But why 5 lines and not any number? It's because mystic masters at those times already saw the significance of sacred geometry, even in music, that is, that the pattern of number 5 always shows up repeatedly, even in this topic of sharp notes and flat notes in the musical scale. And putting marks on the staves, which is in this case the symbols of sharps or flats, is in fact necessary to illustrate what key the music is based. But still, always remember that a musical key is the starting pitch of any music, which the musician or the singer could right away determine if the key fits into the voice range of the singer. If not, it must be shifted to another key that is suitable for the singer. And this shifting or adjustment is called transposition. However, it is the job of the musician to adjust the key. But if you yourself are the one playing the guitar and at the same time singing the songs, then you should therefore master this principle of key adjustment or transposition for you not to be out of tune, especially at high notes, or, in most cases for the women, the lower notes. And an easy way to know your voice pitch is by using the piano or organ keyboard, tapping the keys one by one from the lower octave up to the highest octave that you can reach, while you are also synchronizing your humming of a la, 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 to the sound of each key, or chanting the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, while at the same time listening to your own humming or chanting, making sure that you are resonating the sound of each key in those octaves, and not to be out of tune. In this way, you are also training your ear, which is your sense of hearing, to be able to identify each tone, note, and key. And this is usually referred to as music by ear training. It is also because determining the key is very important in music. But if the music is just in an instrumental form, then there is no problem for the musician to play the music in whatever key it has, whether higher notes or not. But at first, you must know and understand that sound, especially in music, is divided into 2 regions, the treble sound and the bass sound, which you can also find in the labels of the treble knob and the bass knob used in sound amplifiers. But this topic of the treble and bass sound is one of the rudiments of music that you must be aware of. This is why, even in the sheet music, you will find these 2 divisions of separate groups of 5 lines. Where one upper group of 5 lines has the symbol of treble clef, also called the G clef, and the bass clef. And the French word clef simply means key, as in the key of C, or key of G, and so on. And these 2 groupings are separated by a round dot with a very short line to indicate that it is the middle of both the treble staff and the bass staff, which is the middle C, as the Roman numeral 1 of the key of C, located in the 4th octave of the 7th octaves of a grand piano, having 3 extra keys on the lowest note and another key on the highest note, making in all 88 keys that is used in concert piano. Remember that the Roman numeral 1 as the root note do can be shifted to any root depending on what key the music is. The middle C is called the C4 in the ISO because it is the C note of the middle A that is called A4 in the ISO, which is the basis of all the standard tuning of musical instrument nowadays, having the 440 Hz frequency, although many musicians still do not follow today and instead deviated their tunings. And by seeing the number of sharp or flat sign beside these treble clef or bass clef, we can immediately tell what key the music is, such that if there are no sharp nor flat sign, it means that the music should be played in the key of C. And if there is a note represented by a round object symbol on the first line of the treble staff or on the second line of the bass staff, the note should be read simply as F note. This is because the reading of the notes that are placed either on the lines or spaces on the treble staff is in the same pattern as to the lateral formation on the keyboard, such that the middle C between the treble staff and the bass staff is the same middle C on the keyboard. The note on the space between the middle C and the 5th line of the treble staff is the D note. The note exactly on the 5th line of the treble staff is the E note. The note on the space between the 5th and the 4th lines of the treble staff is the F note. And the note on the 4th line of the treble staff is the G note, while the note on the space between the 4th and the 3rd lines is the same middle A that we are talking about. And so, the note that is exactly on the 3rd line of the treble staff is the B note, while the note that is on the space between the 3rd and the 2nd lines is the C note as the start of the new octave. Even if we go up further the scale, we can just continue the same pattern in the previous octave such that the next D note is on the 2nd line on the treble staff, the E note is on the space between the 2nd and 1st lines, and the next note on the 1st line of the treble staff is the higher F note. That was why, when we began our first F note, it is actually on this same line of F note. Then, the note on the space above the first line is the higher G note. And the note on the additional short line above the space with the G note is the higher A note. And scaling up further on the space above the line of A note is the B note. Even if we go down the scale in the bass staff, we will still get the same pattern of the octave, such as the lower B note, the A note, the G note, and the same F note that we have already talked about. If you still remember, we have already discussed that this F note initially corresponds to the original Roman numeral bass 4 of the lateral formation, which was derived from the right triangle bass grouping. It is for this reason that the bass 4 was the original bass point, as taught by the ancient mystic masters, such as Pythagoras, in laying out even the mystical and transcendent arrangement of the strings in the ancient lute, becoming then the basis. Also for the arrangement of the guitar strings, which starts also on the bass 4, as the bass tone on the fret number 1 of the fretboard, being the bass starting point of the mystical right triangle that was transformed into an equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious lateral formation. Mystically and technically speaking, although all the notes to the left of the middle C are considered lower pitch notes and all the notes to the right of the middle C are considered higher pitch notes, and, although the middle A was made in this modern generation as the standard for tuning the musical instruments, still, the F note, being the Roman numeral 4 in the bass grouping, was traditionally the ancient bass foundation for all the pitching tunings and tones of the musical notes. This is why, now, we can see how the guitar strings were arranged like this, adjusting the two highest strings, which are the first and the second strings, to a one note lower to perfectly align diagonally with the bass 4, which is the lower F note nearest the middle C. And obviously, on the other hand, the position of the middle C in the guitar fretboard is located on the first fret of the second string, while the middle A is on the fifth fret of the first string. This is also the reason why guitar strings were the first to be arranged in the treble and bass groupings, which is very noticeable in a classical guitar, such that the strings in the bass grouping are wrapped coiled with brown metal, such as brass or copper, etc. Remember that guitar was invented first, way back ahead than the piano or organ keyboard. And because of this arrangement, sheet music, which started only in the classical era, adopted also this pattern on the spaces of the treble staff, which could easily be remembered as the word face. And all the lines in the treble staff correspond to the notes E, G, B, D, F, which can also be simply remembered by the phrase, "Everybody gets better doing fair." It is also for all these reasons, which we have discussed so far, that you should have realized by now the significance of mysticism in everything, its essentials to the understanding of the rudiments of music, as well as its importance even in your life, in which those esoteric teachings were already taught by the ancient mystic masters, including Jesus, who is the greatest mystic master among them all. And this bass 4, as the perfect fourth that corresponds to note F, is in fact the reason why, even in this topic of sharps and flats in music and the circle of 4, the note F became the starting bass point in the rudiments of music. This is why, even in the electronic piano or organ today, with a built-in left-hand solo finger key automatic accompaniment for chords, while playing the melody with the right hand, the lower F key near the middle C is the start of this one-finger chord accompaniment. Moreover, the notes that preceded the bass F note are just the same pattern of notes in an octave, etc. And bass 4 is also the reason why the note F is the first to become an only one sharp note in either of the two clefs in the key of G. Take note also that the sharp sign is written in the lines of F note on both clefs, which means to say that any note represented by a round dot written on F line is not read anymore simply as F note that is played on the F note key, whether on a piano or organ keyboard or on a guitar fretboard. Instead, the key to be played should rather be the black F sharp key, whether again on a piano or organ keyboard or on a guitar fretboard. And the note on the F lines on either staff should be now read as F sharp note. Nevertheless, even if you are still in the key of G, you may encounter sometimes along the sheet music, on either the treble staff or the bass staff, a sign like this. And this is called a natural sign, that, when this appears in the sheet music, it is now telling you that you must revert to the natural reading of the note that exactly follows next this natural sign, to the normal reading of that note, which, in this case, is the note F, either on the keyboard or on fretboard. And back to the F sharp note, if the sharp sign appears again on the F lines. And this natural sign switching is also true to all other keys. But sharp signs can appear on many lines or spaces on the staff, depending on what key the music is to be played. Try practice reading those notes on the staff having a sharp sign, whether they are positioned in the spaces or in the lines of the staff. Just be sure to determine the corresponding letter of the note assigned on the staff. Then, if there is a sharp sign, read that note as a sharp. And yet, it is very necessary now, as your assignment, to practice reading them on your own, because music is an art that requires constant, continuous, repeated, and correct practices of those basic principles until everything becomes a conditioned reflex or natural to you. But still, always remember that, in any arts, academics, or sports, it is not just the practices that make things perfect, but rather, it is the correct practices that make things perfect. Otherwise, everything will just become bad habit to you. But how can you make correct practices if you are not well informed? This is why, even in music, there must be correct information to input into your mind. And it is in reality your mind that perceives everything through your senses. And yet, what you can perceive in everything around you also depends on the information that you have already inputted into your mind. This is why different people see the same thing differently, depending again on the level of their understanding. And whatever your mind can comprehend and your heart can have confidence in, then your physical body will surely accomplish. But still, you should realize that it is the spirit who is the doer, and therefore, it is also the spirit who is actually the achiever. And so, it is not you. It's because, just as you put your musical instrument into action, you are also the spirit's instrument that is put into action. For this reason, your action now is to put your awareness not only to the sacred geometrical patterns existing in music, but also to the numerical patterns controlling and prevailing in music, which are hidden to the uninformed but are now being laid down to your attention in this video. If you are keen enough to notice, we have already been showing and discussing to you those numbers patterns. Just like, for example, these concealed number patterns that are controlling even the sharps and flats in music. This arrangement did not just appear randomly, taken accidentally from nowhere. The patterns in music were discovered by those ancient mystic masters after their diligent observations, assiduous introspections, and transcendent meditations on things around them. It is because whatever thing a man's heart passionately, perseveringly, and enthusiastically seek, his mind will then find, perceive, and understand it. This was why they saw not only those significant patterns in music but also the essential elements of music for the musicians, which are expressed in the progression of the combination of harmonious chords, in the rising and falling of melodic notes, and the rhythmic beats using the bass or percussions, like drum, and so on, so as to induce to the body and soul of the listeners the mood of the music. But these three elements can be expressed also in three simple words, which are harmony, melody, and rhythm. But for the songwriters, these three elements of music are not the only things they need to know, because they should also know that the composition of the words they write in their songs must not only be able to induce the mood of the music, but must also be able to captivate the hearts and minds of the listening public to the message of their songs. And this thing can be said in just one word, and that is, the lyrics. But more importantly, a songwriter must know and understand these numerical patterns in these sharp and flat notes, and be able to identify each one of them. Just like, for example, F-sharp note is the first sharp note to be recognized by those ancient mystic masters, since the F note initially corresponds to the Roman numeral 4 in an octave, being the starting bass point in music, then followed by C-sharp note, G-sharp note, D-sharp note, A-sharp note, E-sharp note, and the B-sharp note. But why did the ancient mystic masters arrange all these notes like this, if they had not taken these things accidentally from nowhere? It's again because of their diligent observations, assiduous introspections, and transcendent meditations on things around them that led them to understand sacred geometry and numerology. You should realize that there is nothing wrong with the word numerology because numero means number and logi means study. Therefore, numerology simply means the study of numbers. Unfortunately, they are branded now as evil by those religious fanatics. But still, beware. And be aware, because of the presence of fake numerologists. And they are everywhere, spreading fake numerology. Since numerology talks about numbers, it is therefore better to associate in your mind the word numbers to numerology. And when combining both these topics of sacred geometry and numerology or numbers, then it is therefore the subject of mathematics. This is also why Pythagoras, who was known historically as a mathematician and a philosopher, was also linked to music, because he was also teaching all these esoteric principles of music according to those ancient references that were found. On the other hand, if you are interested in knowing those references, sourcebooks, and codices, it is therefore your assignment to search for them, to utilize your own efforts. And so, it was also for this reason that Pythagoras was likewise considered as an ancient mystic master. Nonetheless, mystic masters were and are scattered all over the world even now, in this modern generation. In the same manner of diligent observations, assiduous introspections, and transcendent meditations on things around us, the author likewise discovered, learned, and understood these things that are now being shared to you in this video. That was why he learned music not from any person, musician, or from any school of music, because he was rather granted by the Spirit within him and moved him through self-study and again through diligent observations, assiduous introspections, and transcendent meditations on things around us, that he learned many esoteric things about mysticism by himself alone that are even found in music. But remember, they are all graces given by the Spirit within him. However, whenever the author mentions the word meditation, he does not mean contemplating with religious prayers, but rather putting his own self into nothingness, setting aside his own ego, or self-knowledge, etc. And it is in the same manner that Jesus made himself nothing. Even you, if you made yourself nothing, you will experience within you that the law of attraction will naturally happen to you. The law of attraction is the same law of magnetism, that is, that opposite polarities attract. It is because, from your nothingness, the natural tendency is that your inner self will attract all the fullness of Him who fills up all things in every way. In this manner, you will also understand mystical things that can be found even in music, such as those number patterns present everywhere in all those rudiments of music. And one of them is this topic of sharps and flats. We have already learned that the key of G has only one sharp on both clefs. And just by seeing the number of sharps in the sheet music, we can immediately tell what key the music will be played, such that, if there are 2 sharps, it is in the key of D. If there are 3 sharps, it is in the key of A. 4 sharps is the key of E. 5 sharps is the key of B. 6 sharps is the key of F sharp. And the key of C sharp will have 7 sharps. You must exert your own effort practicing conscientiously in determining what spaces and lines are those sharps positioned in the sheet music in order to master them. But still, always remember that all these 7 letters in the scale correspond to the 7 Roman numerals in an octave, which we originally arranged without anybody teaching us, in our lateral formation, or in our circular formation, deriving from the right triangle, due to our knowledge of sacred geometry and mysticism, for an easy identification of all those 12 notes numbering in a scale. Always connect them in your mind, perceiving the alignment of all those 12 notes numbering to the 7 Roman numerals, to the do, re, mi, and to the 7 letters of the alphabet. In this way, you won't be lost in all those sequences, in all those patterns in music. And that wherever you start your root note, all those 12 notes numbering, those do, re, mi, and those 7 letters, must still follow the sequential order of the 7 Roman numerals. For this reason, you will understand why the pattern was arranged this way. Since the 7 Roman numerals are fixed, which are the basic pattern in an octave, let us therefore put them on top and change all the previous 7 Roman numerals to the 7 letters of the alphabet and retain the do, re, mi on their same positions. And this arrangement is actually the key of C, having no sharp nor flat notes on whatever white keys. We have already learned that the key of G has one sharp note, and that is the F sharp note, which is the 7th in the Roman numerals of an octave. Take note that, although the key of G has one sharp note, it has however 3 flat notes, because the note B is also called C flat note and the note E is also called F flat note. But the key of G cannot use the G flat note and the F flat note because there will be problems in sequential order of the musical letters, such as the jumping from the letter F to the letter D, the repetition of the letter C in the Roman numerals 3 and 4, and the letter C jumping to the letter A from the Roman numerals 3 to 2. On the other hand, the key of D has 2 sharp notes, which are the F sharp note and the C sharp note. Pay attention that the C sharp note is also the 7th note in this octave. But the key of D cannot use all its flat notes because problems will also result in the sequential order of the musical letters in the scale. Moreover, the key of A has 3 sharp notes, which are the F sharp note, the C sharp note, and the G sharp note. In the same way, take note again that the G sharp note is also the 7th note of the Roman numerals in an octave. And yet, again, the key of A cannot use all its flat notes because problems will also result in the sequential order of the musical letters in the scale. Next on this pattern is the key of E, which has the F sharp note, the C sharp note, the G sharp note, and the D sharp note, which is also the 7th note in the Roman numerals of an octave. Similarly, the key of E cannot use its flat notes because of the same problems that will be produced. Then, following this pattern list is the key of B, which has also the F sharp note, the C sharp note, the G sharp note, the D sharp note, and the A sharp note, which is also the 7th note of the Roman numeral in an octave. Conversely, always remember that even if the key of B has 5 sharp notes, still, it has 7 flat notes that correspond exactly to the 7 white notes of an octave, as in its alternate name, key of C flat. This is because the B note is a C flat note in itself and the E note is an F flat note. This is why there are also the natural existence of the 7 flat notes in the key of B being the key of C flat itself. Moreover, the key of F sharp has the F sharp note as already its root note, and then the same C sharp note, G sharp note, D sharp note, A sharp note, and E sharp note, which is also the 7th note of the Roman numerals in an octave. However, the key of F sharp has the same number of flat notes in its alternate name, key of G flat, which are the G flat note, A flat note, B flat note, C flat note, D flat note, and the E flat note. But take note that the E sharp note cannot become a flat note because it is an F note in itself. Moreover, the key of C sharp has 7 sharp notes because of the E sharp note, which is actually an F note, and the B sharp note, which is initially a C note, that are naturally existing together with all the obvious sharp notes in the key of C sharp. And the B sharp note is also the 7th note of the 7 Roman numerals in an octave. Therefore, the arrangement of the sequence of the F sharp note, the C sharp note, the G sharp note, the D sharp note, the A sharp note, the E sharp note, and the B sharp note in this particular order is to demonstrate that they are all the 7th note of these musical keys. But, if you are keen enough to notice, the pattern of the 7th note is also the same pattern vertically, from the key of C to the key of C sharp downward. And the sequence of the pattern of the musical letters is the same cyclic repetition of those musical letters, such as the letter F, which is the base 4, as the perfect fourth of the musical scale and is also its base point, then, followed by the letter C, the letter G, the letter D, the letter A, the letter E, the letter B, and back to the letter F and the letter C. But still, have you ever ruminated on how did those ancient mystic masters know this series of letters? Where again did they get this sequence? And yet, if you will free yourself from the box of your limitation through diligent observations, assiduous introspections, and transcendent meditations, you will also realize that it is all again because of their knowledge of sacred geometry of the right triangle, which we have already discussed, resulting to the equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious lateral formation that is also transformed to a circular formation. This is why all these patterns produce the perfect fourth note, the perfect fifth note, and the relative minor note of whatever key the music is played. With regards to the relative minor, we have elaborated already this topic, just review it later when finished. But still, let's dig in more details about the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. Nevertheless, let's proceed first with the perfect fifth note coupled with the relative minor note. And yet, let's start from the top, that is, the key of C. And then, let's put all the musical letters of key of C in sequence within our lateral formation, starting with the musical letter C as its root major note. Here, we could see that the musical letter G is the perfect fifth note in the key of C. Furthermore, let's also pay attention to the corresponding relative minor note, numbered Roman numeral 6, of every root major note, numbered Roman numeral 1, then, jot them down one by one for every musical key. Here, the root note C has the letter A note as its relative minor note. And since the note G is the perfect fifth note in the key of C, let us then shift to the note G as the start of our next octave and the root note of the key of G. Then, let's put all the rest of the musical letters in sequence. Again, here in our sequence, we can see that the perfect fifth note of the key of G is the note D, and its relative minor note is the note E. Similarly, even if we shift to start at the note D, being the previous perfect fifth note of the key of G, to become now the root note in the key of D, and change again all the other musical letters in sequence in the key of D, we will find that the perfect fifth note this time is the note A, and the relative minor note is the note B. In the same way, if we shift to start at the note A and put again the sequential order of all the musical letters of the key of A, we will also find that the perfect fifth note is the note E, and the relative minor note is the F sharp note. In the same principle, if we start on the note E as the root note of the key of E, we will get the note B as the perfect fifth note of the key of E, and its relative note is the note C sharp. Likewise, in continuing the same pattern and shifting to the key of B, the perfect fifth note is the F sharp note, while the relative minor note is the G sharp note. The same pattern we will get when we start at the note F sharp as the root note of the key of F sharp, having its perfect fifth note, the note C sharp, and its relative minor, the note D sharp. And it is also all in the same pattern when starting with the note C sharp being the root note of the key of C sharp that you will get the note G sharp as its perfect fifth note and its relative minor note, the note A sharp. Now, if you will only try to make an assiduous scrutiny and meticulous analysis of all these repeated sequences for every musical key, you will also realize that the arrangement of all these musical letters, even of those relative minor notes sequences, which we have just color-coded for easy identifications, is just all in the same cyclical pattern that are actually in the same counting of the perfect fifth note, which is always repeated in every octave. But let us clarify and emphasize something on our table, which lists the root major notes with their corresponding relative minor notes, not only regarding the counting of the letters for each perfect fifth note on every musical scale, but also regarding the cyclical pattern of those musical letters we get from the Roman numeral 1, which are all the root major notes for all those musical keys, up to their corresponding Roman numeral 6 in an octave, which are all the equivalent relative minor notes of each key. But all the root major notes and their relative minor notes must be differentiated in its musical notation to immediately determine whether the letters are root major or relative minor. To do this differentiation, it is better to add a lowercase letter m to every note in our listing of the relative minor notes to be instantly understood as relative minor and leave the root major note as is. Moreover, you should learn by heart these root major notes with their corresponding relative minor notes by practicing repeatedly writing those respective root major notes and their corresponding relative minor notes in a sheet of paper from your memory until you master them all to be part of you. It's because they are really very important topics in music, especially the patterned groupings of root major notes with their respective relative minor notes in every musical key, such as the key of G, the key of D, the key of A, the key of E, the key of B, the key of F sharp, and so on. But we will elaborate more of these groupings a little later after we finish our topic in our previous discussion of sharps and flats and the musical keys. Now, let's go back again to our preceding lesson of the sequential pattern of the perfect fifth in the musical scale. Since the last musical key we've just discussed was the key of C sharp having the G sharp as its perfect fifth note, then, if you will start the next series of musical notes with the note G sharp and continue putting all the complete letters of the musical scale in sequential order, calling the key now as key of G sharp, you will find that, basing on all the white sharp notes that followed, you will be jumping right away from the E sharp note on the Roman numeral 6 to the note G on the Roman numeral 7 that will have a missing letter F on the white notes of the Roman numerals. And so, it is not recommended to start with the nomenclature of G sharp note because you will obviously not be able to complete the sequential order of the musical letters in an octave. For this reason, it is advisable to start with the other name of the note G sharp, which is the note A flat. Anyway, the note A flat is also the note G sharp. Let us therefore complete the sequential order of the musical letters of this octave by basing the sequence of the musical letters on all the white flat notes, disregarding now the series of the sharp notes in the key of G sharp, calling the key of G sharp always as the key of A flat, which suitably completes the musical letters of an octave in sequential order. Also now, we are certain to write that there are 4 flat notes in the key of A flat. Since there are errors produced in this octave when calling it as key of G sharp, therefore, we will never call this octave as key of G sharp but instead only as key of A flat. Since flat notes are just the opposite of the sharp notes and the key of A flat being the key of G sharp that simply follows next the key of C sharp, which is the same key of D flat that we already learned in our previous discussion, having 5 flat notes, therefore, we should read the sequence of the listing of the flat notes in reverse direction, such that the letter B becomes the first flat note in the sequence of key of D flat, followed by the letter E as the E flat note, the letter A as the A flat note, the letter D as the D flat note, and the letter G as the G flat note. It is also for this same reason that we can arrange the sequence of the 4 flat notes of the key of A flat, verifying them from the lateral formation below as B flat note, E flat note, A flat note, and D flat note. Likewise, if you would still remember our previous discussion on the key of F sharp, which is also the same key of G flat itself, you will find that there are 6 flat notes, which are the B flat note, E flat note, A flat note, D flat note, G flat note, and C flat note, in which the C flat note is the flat note of the note B itself. And it is also in the same way with the key of B that, although it has only 5 sharp notes, being the key of C flat itself, it has however 7 flat notes, which are the B flat note, E flat note, A flat note, D flat note, G flat note, C flat note, and F flat note. But if the flat notes in the key of B are to be used, then this key should rather be called as the key of C flat. Always remember that the key of A flat could never be called the key of G sharp due to the unavoidable sequencing error of the musical letters that we have just shown. However, the key of B, key of F sharp, key of C sharp can be alternately called in their flat names, such as the key of C flat, key of G flat, key of D flat, respectively, depending again on the root note the musical scale started. Moreover, if we shift to start a music with the key of E flat being the previous perfect fifth note of the key of A flat, we will find out that the new perfect fifth note becomes the note B flat, whereas our new root note now is the note E flat. But if we will be using the musical letters here in this octave on the white notes of the 7 Roman numerals having the sharp notes, we will also get unavoidable errors, which are the repetition of the same letter G in the white notes of Roman numeral 3 and the Roman numeral 4, and the same letter D in the white notes of Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 7, as well as the jumping from the letter D to the letter F in both Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2. And so, similar to the key of A flat here, in this key of E flat, we cannot call this octave as the key of D sharp, but instead, we are constrained to call this as key of E flat only, which has 3 flat notes on the white Roman numerals 1, 4, and 5. And they are the B flat note, E flat note, and A flat note. Similarly, if we repeat once again the same pattern as before, to start an octave with a new root note deriving from the preceding perfect fifth B flat note, then we will find that this new sequence of the musical letters will also have the same problems as in the key of D sharp, that is, if we will also base our sequential order of the musical letters on the sharp notes. Therefore, we are constrained again not to call this octave as the key of A sharp but only as the key of B flat, which has 2 white flat notes, the B flat and the E flat notes. Likewise, shifting again to a new root note which we get from the same note of the current perfect fifth note F, we can call now this new octave, having the root note F, as the key of F, which has only 1 white flat note, that is, the B flat note, in the Roman numeral 4. Even if the B flat note is the same A sharp note in the Roman numeral 4, still, we won't be able to use this A sharp note in the sequence of the musical letters in this scale, because of the obvious occurrence of the repetitive use of the letter A in the white notes of this octave. This is why we will always stick to the use of B flat note in the key of F and never the A sharp note. Furthermore, repeating again the same pattern to start a new root note deriving from the same note of the preceding perfect fifth note C, we are therefore coming back again in the same key of C as before when we started this study of the perfect fifth note in music. Always remember that the key of C has no sharp nor flat notes on all the white notes of the Roman numerals of the musical scale or octave. Since we arrived on the same key of C where we started this sequential pattern in music, this therefore shows that we are actually in a circle. That is why rounding the circle is repeating the cycle, as in a clock, which was also clearly demonstrated in our circular formation of the musical scale. But still, we have already established and proven that even in our lateral formation, which we derived from the right triangle, we could also perceive the circle of the musical scale. This was also why guitars' fretboards and piano organ keyboards that have the same cyclical pattern, which was taken from this principle of the sacred geometry of all the patterns used, combined with the genuine numerology of all the mystical numbers used as well, such as the number 1 for the one whole cyclical pattern of the musical scale, and, as the root note, the number 3 for the basic formations of the chords, the number 4 for the base point of the bass, as well as for the other formations of chords, and for the perfect fourth foundation of the scale, the number 5 for the perfect fifth and the perfect sixth, which is the relative minor of the key, the number 7 for the 7 musical scale on the 7 Roman numerals, the number 12 for the total number of notes in an octave, and so on. Now that you are reminded with all these numerical codes, let us see more of these cyclical patterns, as in a clock again. And so, let's draw a circle, within which is a white background, and divide this circle into 12 parts, as in a clock. But we must twist these divisions in a little oblique because we will insert the musical letters instead of the 12 numbers of the clock. But still, let's make borders where the musical letters are to be inserted with a light blue color and the center with a light yellow-green color to make this more artistic. Correspondingly, it is better to put our current circular formation to be inserted later with musical letters in the place of our former circular formation of the Roman numerals so that we can openly see our listing of our last discussion of the sharp and flat notes. Here, we could see right away in our list the key of C as the last key we arrived at, which was in fact the same first key we started with earlier. Therefore, let us put the letter C on the center below our circular formation. Also, we could see in the key of C that there are no sharp nor flat notes on the white notes of the 7 musical scale of the 7 Roman numerals, which are the Do, Re, Mi. And so, let's put a 0 on top of the letter C. Since we have just returned to the key of C, let us again see our previous listing after we started with the key of C itself, which just shows that we are really in a circle. And yet, do not forget that, on every next root note of the key we started, it is actually the perfect fifth note of every preceding key itself, such that the perfect fifth note of key of C is G note. And as the key of G, it has only one sharp note within the white notes of the 7 Roman numerals. Then, the perfect fifth note of the key of G is the note D. And shifting to the key of D now has 2 sharp notes. And the perfect fifth note of the key of D is the note A. And the perfect fifth note of the key of A, which has 3 sharp notes, is the note E. Then, shifting to the perfect fifth note E as the new root note in the key of E, this key of E now has 4 sharp notes. And its perfect fifth note is the B note, the same C flat note depending on the scaling direction. Always remember that, from the key of G up to the key of E, we won't be able to use all the flat notes in their scales because of those problems that are produced. Therefore, we will stick to use only the sharp notes in these musical keys from key of G to the key of E. Subsequently, the key of E is followed by the key of B, which is also called the key of C flat. Although the key of B has 5 sharp notes, still, being the key of C flat itself, it has 7 flat notes. And its perfect fifth note is the F sharp note, or the G flat note. And when shifting to the F sharp note or G flat note as the new root note for the key of F sharp note or G flat note, this key then has the maximum balance number of 6 sharp notes and 6 flat notes. It is for this reason that the key of F sharp or G flat is the opposite polarity of the key of C, similar to the north and south poles of the earth. Even if we will look at the circular formation of the musical scale, we can still find their oppositeness. This oppositeness can best be understood if we will transform this circle into a circular waveform, which is entirely the same principle as in the understanding of a sine waveform, where there is the waxing of the tide, the climbing of the scale, the rising towards the top, or the increasing numbers of sharp notes until it reaches the peak at its middling maximum value, where there will come next the waning of the tide, the descending of the scale, the falling towards the ground, or the decreasing numbers of flat notes until it becomes 0 in its value, which corresponds to the musical letter C. And this principle of the ebb and flow of everything in nature can also be seen in the wheel of life. And yet, no one could escape from this dualistic principle of everything in nature, even in music. And this dualistic principle of everything in nature was already symbolized by the ancient mystic masters in the emblem of the yin and yang. That even the story of the prodigal son in the scripture is hardly noticed by those who are not well informed with this dualistic principle of everything in nature. Almost everybody who had read or heard this story just focused their attention to the formerly bad prodigal son who changed and became a renewed good person. And yet, nobody whom we had spoken to or had discussed with this story could even see the other side of this story, and that is, that the formerly good son, who was obedient to the father all throughout those years, developed in his ego the false pride of thinking he was good, resulting to a much more intensified charge of negativities within himself, producing envy and jealousy in his heart, likened to the presence of the greater number of 7 flat notes, even if the sharp notes are already 5. It was just the same thing happened to the previously good son, that, when his pride soared high, he did not know that his goodness was overpowered by the much more intensified wickedness within himself. And this principle in the story of the prodigal son is actually the reality of the yin and yang, even in music. This is why music itself teaches us these lessons in life through all these guiding principles of mysticism, which are present and inherent in music. And through mysticism, even if we have not attended the school of music or were not taught by a music instructor, since our background is technical and engineering, still, we clearly understood all these patterns in music, even this perfect fifth that we are discussing so far, such that the perfect fifth note of the key of F sharp or G flat is the C sharp or D flat. And that, if we transpose our music to this key, we will see that this key of C sharp or D flat has 7 sharp notes. And yet, conversely, it has 5 flat notes intrinsic in itself. Moreover, all these end notes are the 7th note of each musical key, which we have discussed already. But since we are now in the waning of the tide, when we started with the key of F sharp or G flat towards the C sharp or D flat, therefore, we will not call any more these succeeding 3 keys in their sharp names, but instead, only in their alternate names as flat, because we already learned those errors that resulted in doing such. If you have forgotten already these things, just review them later when finished. And so, the perfect fifth note of C sharp or D flat is simply the A flat note only. And it is also true when shifting to this key of A flat that there is no more counting done in the sharp notes, but rather, only in the flat notes. For this reason, the key of A flat has 4 flat notes. and its perfect fifth note becomes the E flat note. In the same manner that, if we transpose to this key of E flat, we will now get 3 flat notes, and its perfect fifth note is the B flat note. Likewise, if we will shift to the key of B flat as the next octave, its flat notes now decrease to 2 flat notes. But the key in music that has the least number of flat note is actually the key of F, with its root note F as the perfect fifth note of the preceding key of B flat. This is because the key of F has only one flat note, and that flat note is coincidentally the same B flat note of the preceding key of B flat. But take note again that the perfect fifth note of the key of F is the note C. And so, this just shows that we arrived at the same place as where we started earlier, which is the same key of C. Since all these musical keys in our circular formation having their root note as the perfect fifth note of each of every preceding key, therefore, this circle of our circular formation of these musical keys is popularly known as the circle of fifth in music, having the root note of every key as the perfect fifth note of each preceding key. But the direction of this circle of fifth is clockwise, as in a clock. On the other hand, if you are keen enough to notice that, even if the F note is the perfect fifth note of the key of B flat, and if you will check the numbering of the musical scale and the white notes of the 7 Roman numerals from the key of F in the reverse direction, that is, in counterclockwise direction, towards the B flat note, you will find that the B flat note is the perfect fourth note of the key of F. And that, once you shifted to the key of B flat, you will find that the note E flat is the perfect fourth note of the key of B flat. In the same way, shifting to the key of E flat, the perfect fourth note is the note A flat. In the same manner that, making the note A flat as the root note in the key of A flat, then, the perfect fourth note is the C sharp or D flat note. And to make the C sharp or D flat note as the root note in the key of C sharp or D flat itself, the perfect fourth note is the F sharp or the G flat note. Likewise, if you will shift next to the key of F sharp or the G flat note, you will find that the B note or the C flat note is the perfect fourth note of the key of F sharp or G flat. So far, you should have already realized by now that all these end notes here, including those not shown, are in fact the perfect fourth note of each key in the counterclockwise direction of our circular formation. And that all these corresponding musical keys of flat notes are in fact also written in the sheet music to guide us on what key of flat notes the music has, starting the counting from the key of F, in which the key of F has only one flat note, that is, the B flat note, followed by the key of B flat with 2 flat notes, then key of E flat with 3 flat notes. Next is the key of A flat with 4 flat notes, then the key of D flat with 5 flat notes, followed by the key of G flat with 6 flat notes, and finally, the key of C flat with 7 flat notes. Always remember that the key of C flat is the same with the key of B. Your assignment now is to correctly practice identifying in the sheet music all these flat notes, whether they are placed in the spaces or lines, until you master them all. Also, practice writing in a sheet of paper the corresponding musical letters for every lines and spaces on both the treble clef and the bass clef. Exerting your own effort is extremely necessary for the mastery of any art or sport. Then, you should exercise also your mind as part of the correct mental practices to scrutinize very well the arrangement of all these musical letters and to understand that this sequential pattern of all these letters is always appearing and repeating in music. Take notice of the skipping of one letter to continue to the next consecutive letter, in which if the direction is counterclockwise, the series is in the descending order for the perfect fourth sequential order, where the letter F is followed by the word bead, then G, C, and then back to the letter F again. But if the direction is clockwise, the series is in the ascending manner for the perfect fifth sequential order. Once you understood this by heart, there is no need for you to mentally memorize this sequential pattern. It's because anything that you understood by heart remains with you forever and becomes a part of you, that, even if you have not thought of it for several years or decades, you will instantly retrieve from the storehouse of your memory once you think of it again and can say it spontaneously. But here, what we want you to do is to exert your own effort again, to practice on your own, checking and verifying every perfect fourth note of every preceding key in our circular formation of the musical scale for every octave in this counterclockwise direction, up to the key where you started. You must be seeing the repeated pattern of the letters F, bead, G, C, for the perfect fourth note in every key, until you master them all. In this way, this lesson will also become part of you. This is why the sequential order of our listing for all the musical keys shown here, extending even up to those not shown, demonstrates that the sacred geometrical pattern is always appearing and repeating, even in this perfect fourth notes of every musical key in descending order. It is for this reason that this circle is called in music as the circle of fourth. But still, you must be seeing this circle as either circle of fifth or circle of fourth, depending again on the direction of your transposition or shifting of musical key. Clockwise direction here in our circle means circle of fifth, while counterclockwise here means circle of fourth. You must also realize that, although the circle of fourth and the circle of fifth are two different things, they however became one because of the harmony between them. And this principle is the same thing that would happen to a group of people, that, if they are harmoniously united, they all become one. And this is also true to two individuals as husband and wife. If they are in harmony with each other, then they are not anymore two different persons in two different flesh, but rather, they become two individuals as one flesh. But still, here in our list, we want you to practice again, writing and enumerating on a piece of paper the musical letters of the scale that are on the white notes of the 7 Roman numerals for every octave of each key. Your correct practices on all these things are extremely necessary for the perfection of your musical art. Just do it and persevere. And this is the well-known and yet inconspicuous formula for everything: just do it and persevere, even for the mastery of music. But during your enumeration of all those musical scales of each octave for every key, you should take special notice and highlight the root notes on the Roman numeral 1 and their corresponding Roman numeral 6, which are their matching relative minor notes of those musical keys. Then, jot down those root notes and their corresponding relative minor notes in a table format on that piece of paper. And when you are done, you must be able to make your own table, similar to our previous table of the relative minor of every musical key. But this time, our table here is an extended version of the previous one, completing all the relative minor notes. Memorize this by heart because this is truly important and very useful and often used in music that those master musicians have become proficient at. And our table here is in fact the same with our circular formation. But still, you must perceive our circular formation not only in this way, but also in whatever or wherever key you have started, such that you can place the key of C on top of our circular formation. And your mind should always see the same pattern of all these musical letters in its correct sequential order wherever you start. But still, you should realize that there is always the presence of sacred geometrical patterns in music, even in the pattern of these harmonious groupings of 6 notes for each key, which we have already discussed, such that the grouping of the 6 notes in the key of G, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter G, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter E, which is also the relative minor note, as the E minor of the key of G. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of D, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter D, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter B, which is also the relative minor note, as the B minor of the key of D. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of A, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter A, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter F, as the note F sharp, which is also the relative minor note, as the F sharp minor of the key of A. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of E, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter E, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6, which is the letter C, as the C sharp note. Accordingly, this C sharp minor is the relative minor of the key of E. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of B, or C flat, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter B, or the letter C in its flat form, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter G in its sharp form, or the letter A in its flat form, which is also the relative minor of the key of B. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of G flat or F sharp, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter G in its flat form, or the letter F in its sharp form, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter E in its flat form, or the letter D in its sharp form, which is also the relative minor of the key of G flat or F sharp. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of D flat or C sharp, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter D in its flat form, or the letter C in its sharp form, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter B in its flat form, or the letter C in its sharp form, which is also the relative minor of the key of D flat or C sharp. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of A flat, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter A in its flat form, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter F, which is also the relative minor of the key of A flat. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of E flat, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter E in its flat form, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter C, which is also the relative minor of the key of E flat. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of B flat, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter B in its flat form, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter G, which is also the relative minor of the key of B flat. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of F, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter F, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter D, which is also the relative minor of the key of F. The grouping of the 6 notes in the key of C, in which the Roman numeral 1 is the letter C, which is also the root note, and the Roman numeral 6 is the letter A, which is also the relative minor of the key of C. And if we shift again to the next key, you will find that we will just be repeating again the same sequential pattern of these musical letters, except that the pattern in the row of the relative minors is offset. And the offset depends again on which direction you are. If you are in the clockwise direction, then the counting for the repetition of the musical letter in the relative minor is up to the number 5, that is, arriving at the same musical letter. But if your direction is counterclockwise, then the counting to find the same letter is up to the number 4. This was why we always said that music was derived from the sacred geometry, that you will find sacred geometrical patterns occurring everywhere in music, which are expressed in numbers, even in our preceding discussion of all these groupings of 6 in every musical scale. But why were all these groupings in the number 6? 6 is the numinous symbol for harmony and is mystically symbolized by a hexagon. It was for this reason that engineers discovered way back in the 1830s that the hexagonal-shaped nut and the hexagonal head of the bolt have the most efficient design regarding the head of the bolts and nuts than any of the other designs. And that even if you turn the hexagonal nut or the hexagonal head of the bolt, it has the most proportionate and harmonious distribution of the stress load. But the number 6 can also be represented by a 6-pointed star, likened to the Star of David, which is, in reality, the union of 2 equilateral triangles, one pointing upward, another pointing downward. And the Star of David symbolizes the harmonious union of both the divine nature and the human nature of the heavenly Most High, who came in the flesh as a true and real man like us, born from a virgin mother. Nevertheless, your mind should be able to see and to visualize clearly those patterns of the harmonious groupings of 6 notes, such as in the key of C, the key of G, the key of D, the key of A, the key of E, the key of B or C flat, the key of F sharp or G flat, the key of C sharp or D flat, the key of A flat, the key of E flat, the key of B flat, and the key of F. And so, if we would continue again with the next key, which is the key of C, then we will be starting all over again. But still, it is important to realize that our arrangement of these harmonious groupings of 6 here in this 6-pointed star-shaped combination of 2 equilateral triangles is already giving us the sequential pattern of the musical letters we can find in the 6 white notes of the Roman numerals in an octave of every key, such that the Roman numeral 1 is the one on the top of the equilateral triangle pointing upward, which is also the root note of an octave, as the Do in the Do-Re-Mi. That is followed by the Roman numeral 2, which is equivalent to the Re in the Do-Re-Mi, then followed by the Roman numeral 3, which is equivalent to the Mi in the Do-Re-Mi, by which we now have completed all the elements in the equilateral triangle pointing upward. Then, the Roman numeral 3 is of course followed by the Roman numeral 4, in which we have now shifted to the other equilateral triangle pointing downward, wherein the Roman numeral 4 is also the Fa in the Do-Re-Mi, then followed by the Roman numeral 5, which is equivalent to the Sol in the Do-Re-Mi, then followed by the Roman numeral 6, which is equivalent to the La in the Do-Re-Mi, in which we have now completed all the elements in the equilateral triangle pointing downward. Always remember that the equilateral triangle pointing upward contains the Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3 in a counterclockwise direction, while the equilateral triangle pointing downward contains the Roman numerals 4, 5, and 6 in a clockwise direction. Under all these preceding circumstances, you should have realized by now that there is the groupings of the root majors on the top half of our 6-pointed star, which is also the same on the tops of our lateral formation in table format of 2 rows, while the groupings on the bottom half of our 6-pointed star are all the relative minors of those corresponding root majors on the top, which is also the same with the bottom parts of our lateral formation in table format of 2 rows. And so, even if we revert from our 6-pointed star arrangement to its original hexagonal-shaped format and then divide this hexagon into 6 equal parts and further mark them with the Roman numerals for our immediate identification and substituting the bigger encircled Roman numerals with the musical letters of the scale in an octave, such as in the key of C, still, we can perceive not only these root majors grouping at the top and their corresponding relative minors grouping at the bottom, but also the same musical letters of the scale in our lateral formation, which clearly shows the key of C has no sharp nor flat notes. Your assignment now is to constantly practice the scaling correctly by writing on a piece of paper, identifying all the consecutive musical letters for every key, and placing them on your hexagonal arrangement. Always remember that exerting your own effort is necessary for your mastery of music. Accordingly, you must realize that all our arrangements, whether they be this hexagonal or the six-pointed star or the table format or even our lateral formation below, are all giving us not only the musical letters of a scale for every key but also the corresponding relative minor note for every root major note of any key. And it is not only the relative minor Roman numeral 6 of the root note Roman numeral 1 of the musical key but also the corresponding relative minor Roman numeral 2 of the root major Roman numeral 4 as well as the corresponding relative minor Roman numeral 3 of the root major Roman numeral 5. Comparatively, it is the same in all musical key, such that if we shift to the key of G, which has only one sharp note, that is, the F sharp note. But do not forget that our hexagonal arrangement of the harmonious grouping of 6 is the same with our grouping of 6 in our table format of 2 rows. And, if we transpose once more to the key of D, we can see again not only the harmonious grouping of 6 in our table format but also the 2 sharp notes in our lateral formation, which are the F sharp and the C sharp notes. Likewise, shifting to the key of A, which has 3 sharp notes such as the F sharp, C sharp, and the G sharp notes, our hexagonal arrangement is not only giving us the musical letters of the scale in our lateral formation but also the same harmonious grouping of 6 in our table format of 2 rows. And so, every time you shift to another musical key, like for example the key of E, do not forget that all our formats here are giving us the same sequences of the scale as well as the relative minors for each musical key. And so, let us pass forward for all these next keys, such as the key of B or C flat, the key of F sharp or G flat, the key of C sharp or D flat, the key of A flat, the key of E flat, the key of B flat, the key of F, and back to the key of C. Your assignment now is to practice writing on a piece of paper the musical letters of the key of C flat, key of G flat, and key of D flat, which are the same key of B, key of F sharp, and key of C sharp respectively, and which we have already discussed. You should practice them repeatedly, writing on a piece of paper their musical letters in a scale as well as the other musical keys, whether they are the keys of sharp or the keys of flat. Do these exercises until you mastered them all. But besides all these musical scaling, you should also master the relative minor of every root major key that we already always emphasize to you by memorizing them in your heart and mind, such that the key of C has the A minor as its relative minor. The key of G has the E minor as its relative minor. The key of D has the B minor as its relative minor. But take note that the root major note D falls into the Roman numeral 2 as the D minor, the first minor in the key of C, in our topic of the harmonious grouping of 6. The key of A has the F sharp minor as its relative minor. The key of E has the C sharp minor as its relative minor. Take note also that the root major note E falls into the Roman numeral 3 as the second minor in the key of C. These things are not coincidences because they are all well-planned patterns of the creator of the sacred geometry. The key of B or the key of C flat has the G sharp minor or A flat minor as its relative minor respectively. The key of F sharp or the key of G flat has the D sharp minor or E flat minor as its relative minor, respectively. Take special notice of the root major note F sharp or the root major note G flat as the same F sharp note or the G flat note of the musical scale in the key of C. Always remember that the F sharp note or the G flat note is the opposite polarity of the note C in music, which we have already elaborated earlier. If you have forgotten already, just review them later when finished. The key of C sharp or the key of D flat has the A sharp minor or B flat minor as its relative minor, respectively. The key of A flat has the F minor as its relative minor. The key of E flat has the C minor as its relative minor. The key of B flat has the G minor as its relative minor. The key of F has the D minor as its relative minor. But let us see again our listing of all the keys and flats and copy all the numbers of the flat notes for each key. Then, let's go back again to our listing of all the keys and sharps, then copy also all the numbers of the sharps notes for each key. Now, let us transfer all the numbers of the sharp and flat notes of each key to our circular formation and erase all those numbers of sharp and flat notes in our lateral formation. But still, let us make our circular formation in a much better arrangement. Moreover, let us move our listing of the root major keys and their corresponding relative minors to our circular formation. Now, we can still see the harmonious grouping of 6 for each key. However, it is better to write all these root majors and their relative minors exactly on our circular formation to have a better presentation. Then, let's make a review on the harmonious grouping of 6 through the identification of the 6 Roman numerals. Nevertheless, do not forget that this harmonious grouping of 6 is in fact the combination of the triangle pointing upward having the Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3, which for the key of C are the root major C, the D minor, and the E minor, and the other triangle pointing downward which has the Roman numerals 4, 5, and 6 that correspond to the major key of F, major key of G, and the relative A minor of the key of C. Even if we shift to the key of G, we can still find the same 6 Roman numerals having the same pattern of the Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3 in a counterclockwise direction, while the Roman numerals 4, 5, and 6 are in the clockwise direction. It is just the same with the key of D having the root major D followed by E minor and F sharp minor in a counterclockwise direction, while root major G, root major A, and the B minor are in the clockwise direction. Your assignment now is to continue writing in a piece of paper all the grouping of 6 for each key until you master them all. Another key point to remember is that the sequential pattern of the musical letters of both layers are exactly the same, except that the second layer is offset. If the direction is clockwise, the offset is in the count of 5. If the direction is counterclockwise, the offset is in the count of 4. Like for example, the letter C of the root major, which is in the upper layer, can be found in the second layer in the count of 5 clockwise. But in the counterclockwise direction, the letter C in the second layer is in the count of 4. Although the harmonious grouping is just the Roman numerals 1 to 6 of the musical scale in an octave, still, the 7th note in the Roman numeral 7 is very useful, especially when shifting keys in a song, just as it also enriches the harmony that can be felt. Therefore, we cannot just disregard the 7th note of the musical scale. And so, we must add another layer in our circular formation for all the 7th note in an octave for every key. And we will write the 7th note as the dominant 7th, such that for the key of C, the 7th note is the letter B, with the number 7 attached to it, completing now our musical scale for every key, from Roman numerals 1 to 7. Similarly, we can now place the dominant 7th for every key on the third layer, such as the F sharp 7 for the key of G, the C sharp 7 for the key of D, the G sharp 7 for the key of A, the D sharp 7 for the key of E, the A sharp 7 or B flat 7 for the key of B or C flat, the F7 or E sharp 7 for the key of F sharp or G flat, the C7 or B sharp 7 for the key of C sharp or D flat, the G7 for the key of A flat, the D7 for the key of E flat, the A7 for the key of B flat, and lastly, the E7 for the key of F. Of course, we will go back to the key of C if we will continue rounding our chord circle. And the third layer for the 7th note of the musical scale, or the dominant 7th for the chords, is in the same sequential pattern of the musical letters in the first and second layers, except that it is offset by the count of 3 with respect to the root key in the first layer if the direction is clockwise. Like for example, the letter C, as the root note in the key of C, can be found in the third layer for the 7th note or dominant 7th at the count of 3. But if the direction is counterclockwise, the offset is in the count of 6. Like for example, the letter A, as the root note of the key of A in the first layer, can be found in the third layer at the count of 6. And it is the same for all other keys. It is for all these reasons, which we have been discussing so far all throughout, that our chord circle is complete in itself, because it has the listing of all the musical letters in a scale for every key which were chanted as the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, that can be found in the 7 Roman numerals of an octave, all the different musical keys with their corresponding numbers of either sharp or flat notes, the perfect 4th and the perfect 5th, in the circle of 4th or the circle of 5th, as well as the circle of 3rd and the circle of 6th in the third layer of our circular formation for the 7th note or dominant 7th, the harmonious groupings of the 3 root majors with their corresponding relative minors and the corresponding dominant 7th, but is sometimes changed by some musicians, deviating to the diminished or diminished 7th form of the 7th note, in which all are necessary for the harmonious progression of chords in music. Then, let's make a list of all the 12 musical keys in sequential order of the musical letters, starting from the key of C. Then, let's divide every key into the 7 Roman numerals, equivalent to the musical scale we can find in every musical key. Then, let's start with the key of C and copy the root majors and their corresponding relative minors, as well as the dominant 7th, from our circular formation to our table format of the harmonious progression of chords. Next is the key of G, then the key of D, the key of A, the key of E, the key of B, the key of F sharp or G flat, the key of D flat or C sharp, the key of A flat, the key of E flat, the key of B flat, and finally the key of F. It is for all these reasons that our circular formation has exactly the same contents or information with that of our lateral formation in table format for all these harmonious groupings of root majors and their relative minors for every musical key. If you are keen enough to notice, we have been intentionally bombarding you with this topic of the harmonious groupings of root majors and their corresponding relative minors because we want you to become like a master in your own rights. We do not want you to become like a copycat in music who are excellently and proficiently trained in reading sheet music and played those music they memorized like master musicians. But when asked to play a different music which they did not memorize and with the absence of those sheet music they do not know anymore what to do. Likewise, many of them were good in playing their memorized songs, but when transpositions to different keys were needed they could not do so. Much more is that they could not even compose their own original music. And so, we could say that they are really like trained monkeys in the art of music. It's all because many of them do not even know the importance of this harmonious progression of chords that is used by songwriters or composers to produce pleasant-sounding melodies of their songs that are actually based on this harmonious groupings of 6 in the pleasant-sounding progression of chords itself, which is also very useful when transposing to different musical keys. Moreover, the chords progression that is commonly used in hundreds of popular songs is the 1, 6, 4, 5, which, if in the key of C, are the chords C, A minor, F, G, and with its variant as 1, 5, 6, 4, which, if in the key of C again, are the chords C, G, A minor, and F. This is why we can find this chords progression in the popular song by the Beatles, Let It Be, written by John Lennon, which are the chords C, G, A minor, F, D minor, C, G, F, E minor, D minor, C. The reason for the good melody of this song is that it follows this harmonious progression of chords in our harmonious grouping of the basic 6 pattern. It is for this reason that we have been bombarding you in order to imprint into your heart and mind this topic of harmonious grouping of 6 that is applied in the harmonious progression of chords. Your assignment later is to practice your own combination of the 6 harmonious groupings of these chords with whatever sequences you want. And yet, always, start with the root major chord of the musical key you wish. But still, you must practice shifting to another musical key by using first the dominant 7th or diminished 7th of the preceding key and then continue your own desired combination with the rest grouping of 6 on that next key. Accordingly, while playing your own combination of those harmonious chords, you must practice humming your own melody that is resonating with the sound of those chords. In this way, you will realize that you, in your own rights, are already composing your own music while practicing those harmonious progressions of chords. Correspondingly, pursue to become a songwriter by practicing poetry with good messages in your lyrics to captivate the heart, mind, body, and soul of your listeners. If you noticed, we have been talking about chords already. And yet, if you will be asked, what really are chords? Or, in other words, what is really a chord? And how come chord is used in music? A chord is basically and primarily a topic in mathematics, specifically in geometry, within the scope of a circle. Chord is used in music because everything in music is about cyclical patterns, as in a circle, of those things we have already discussed and elaborated. This was why ancient mystic masters, such as Pythagoras, were already teaching about all these things that we are talking about. But remember that all these rudiments in music that are being shared to you, plus all the next topics we will have, were not learned from any school of music or from any music instructor or musician, but by the Spirit of Him who fills up all things in every way. It was when the author of this video had always put his inner self into nothingness, that is, during his transcendent meditations, after his diligent observations and assiduous introspections on all these topics shared in this video. He was blessed by the great designer or architect of everything in the whole universe to learn all these esoteric teachings being shared to you. This was why the author understood that the chord used in music is also derived from the sacred geometry, specifically in a circle. And so, let's make a review on what we learned in geometry in the elementary school. A chord is a straight line segment whose both endpoints are situated on the edge or perimeter of a circle that is called circumference, thereby cutting or dividing the circle into 2 segments, the minor segment and the major segment. A chord that passes through the center of a circle is called the diameter, whose half is called a radius. But the cut circumference is called an arc, whether in the major segment or in the minor segment. But the reason why chords were applied to music was that they resulted primarily from the 3 sides of the right triangle, which we have discussed and elaborated already in the early part of this video. and those three numbers that are needed to produce a right triangle with the least or the minimum whole single-digit numbers, which are not in fractions nor with decimals, are the numbers 3, 4, and 5. Moreover, let's divide all the three sides into their corresponding unit numbers and renumber again the two sides into the 7 Roman numerals with the blank resultant side. Then, let us transform again this right triangle into an equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious groupings in the lateral formation. And in the same fashion as we did before, let us again transform our lateral formation into a circular formation. But, let's put again all the accidentals in all the black keys. And let's make a little cleanup on our circle. Meanwhile, let's put back our numbering on our right triangle for every side and the resultant, and then transfer them all, including our red triangle, to our circular formation. Since we were able to show, demonstrate, and confirm the essence and presence of the right triangle even in our circular formation, we can now erase all the numberings of the sides and resultant we placed on our circular formation. And let's turn again our circular formation to make the Roman numeral 1 to be on the top with the tips of the red triangle pointing on the center of the numbers. However, let's improve our circular formation by adding light blue borders and change all the Roman numerals into the musical letters, to start with the letter C on the Roman numeral 1, consecutively followed by the other letters in the musical scale that correspond to the other Roman numerals. Now, we can find that all the tips of our red triangle are pointing to the letters C, E, and G. But then, let us reduce the size of our circular formation so that we can still see all the Roman numerals of our lateral formation. Then, let's move all the Roman numerals on the top so that we can write all the musical letters of the scale in the key of C in our lateral formation. Then, let's have a table on the left to write all the data we can get from the pointing tips of our red triangle, such that for the chord C major we can see that our red triangle is pointing to the notes C, E, and G, that are the corresponding value of the Roman numerals 1, 3, and 5, which also correspond to the numbers 1, 5, and 8. In our 12 Hindu-Arabic numberings. From now on, you must take into consideration not only the Roman numerals but also the Hindu-Arabic numberings of an octave on whatever numbers that those notes of a chord fall into. It's because you will find that the importance of these numbers is likened to a memorized formula that, even if you have not been playing for several years or decades, you can still recall the necessary notes of a chord to press, whether in piano organ keyboards or in guitar fretboard, just because of this memorized formula. Now, we will write all the information we will get from the pointing of our red triangle on our circular formation into our table on the left for all these chords of the musical keys, such that the chord major C sharp or D flat has the note C sharp or D flat, E sharp or note F, G sharp or A flat. Always remember that, although the key of C sharp has 7 sharp notes, it has however only 5 flat notes, being in its alternate name, key of D flat. Then, the chord D major has the notes D, F sharp, and A. Always remember that the chord D major or the key of D will never use the G flat note but only the F sharp note and the C sharp note because of the errors we have previously discussed. If you have forgotten already those errors, then it means that your cup is already full. And so, you must empty your cup so that everything that you see and hear in this video, your heart and your mind can absorb and retain them. Next is the chord E flat major, which has the notes E flat, G, and B flat. Remember again that the key of E flat or the chord E flat will never use its sharp notes but only its 3 flat notes. They are the E flat, the A flat, and the B flat notes. That is why this chord is never called as D sharp major but only as E flat major. And this chord is followed by chord E major, which has the notes E, G sharp, and B. In the same way, chord E major or the key of E will never use its flat notes because of those errors that will be produced, but only its 4 sharp notes. And they are the F sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and the D sharp notes. Then, this chord is followed by chord F major, which has the notes F, A, and C. This time, the chord F or the key of F will never use its note A sharp but only its alternate name, the note B flat, which is its only 1 flat note. Next is the chord F sharp or G flat major, which has the notes F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, or their corresponding flat notes, the G flat, B flat, and the D flat note, respectively. Don't forget that the key of F sharp has 6 sharp notes, or its alternate name, the key of G flat, has 6 flat notes. Next is the chord G major, which has the notes G, B, and D. Always remember that the key of G will never use the G flat note in the Roman numeral 7 because of the error that will be produced. And so, the seventh note is always the F-sharp note, the only one sharp note in the key of G. Then, this chord is followed by the chord A flat major, which has the notes A flat, C, and E flat. This chord is never called as G sharp because of the errors that will be produced. This is why we never use its sharp notes but instead only the four flat notes, being itself the key of A flat, which are the A flat, the B flat, the D flat, and the E flat notes. And then, we follow this chord with the chord A major, which has the notes A, C sharp, and E. Since the chord A major is in the key of A, just as the note A is its root note, we will therefore never use all the flat notes in this key because of the errors that will be produced. Instead, we can only use its three sharp notes, which are the C sharp, F sharp, and the G sharp notes. Next is the chord B flat major, which has the notes B flat, D, and F. The chord B flat major is never called A sharp major because of the errors that will be produced. And so, we will only call this chord as B flat major, which has two flat notes, the B flat note itself as the root note and the E flat note. And lastly, let's shift to the chord B major or C flat major, which has the notes B or C flat, D sharp or E flat, and F sharp or G flat. Although the key of B major has five sharp, which are the C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, G sharp, and the A sharp, its alternate key name as the key of C flat major, however, has seven flat notes, which are the C flat, D flat, E flat, F flat, G flat, A flat, and the B flat. And then, let's put back our chord to chord C major. This time, let's erase first temporarily our listing of the root major chords on our table and the musical scale on our lateral formation, and change the listing in our table to the relative minor chord notations. Then, let's move our circular formation to the left to show again our table of the harmonious progression of chords. But this time, let's reduce the columns to show only the root majors and their corresponding relative minors, and put back our circular formation again in the center. Since the root majors and their corresponding relative minors are just the reversing principle with each other, as in the yin and yang principle, therefore, we will just reverse the arrangement of our red triangle in the center of our circular formation by reversing the position of the 3 units side with that of the 4 units side. And this reversal already makes the difference in the sound produced. We have already learned the reversing mood of the root majors and their corresponding relative minors. Just review them later when finished. Accordingly, let's see first the equivalent of the Hindu Arabic numbers from 1 to 12 to these musical letters in our circular formation, and highlight also the numbers 1, 4, and 8 in our lateral formation, which are patterned from where the tips of our red triangle are pointing at in our circular formation. Then, let's put also the same numbers 1, 4, and 8 in our table on the left as our guide on the numberings of the notes for each relative minor chord. And let's put back again the musical letters on our circular formation and copy those musical letters where the tips of our red triangle are pointing at to our table on the left. But we cannot just right away copy the Roman numerals 1, 2 sharp or 3 flat, and 5 from our lateral formation to our table on the left because the letter C in the C minor is not the root note of the musical scale but is only the relative minor on the Roman numeral 6 of an octave. And the C minor is actually the relative minor of the key of E flat. Therefore, we should rather start our Hindu Arabic number 1 as the Roman numeral 6, followed by the next Roman numerals, with our Hindu Arabic number 4 as our Roman numeral 1, which is the root note of the scale. And so, we can put now the musical letters of the scale in the key of E flat in our lateral formation, starting from the Roman numeral 6 as the relative minor of this octave. For the same reason, we can continue now putting all the notes in the relative minor chords as well as their corresponding musical scales, such as the chord C sharp minor, which is the relative minor of the key of E, with the notes C sharp, E, and G sharp. Here in this key of E, we can only read the 4 sharp notes, which are the C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and G sharp notes, but not the flat notes of the octave because of the errors that will occur. Next is the chord D minor, which is the relative minor of the key of F, with the notes D, F, and A. Remember, we can read only the flat note in the key of F, which is the B flat note alone, but not its sharp note. Then, this chord is followed by the chord D sharp minor or E flat minor, which is the relative minor of the key of F sharp or G flat, with the notes D sharp or E flat, F sharp or G flat, and A sharp or B flat. Moreover, we can read all the 6 sharp notes in the key of F sharp, which are the D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and C sharp notes, or all the 6 flat notes in its alternate name, the key of G flat, which are the E flat, G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, and D flat notes. Next is the chord E minor, which is the relative minor of the key of G, with the notes E, G, and B. We can only read the sharp note in the key of G, which is the F sharp note alone, but not its flat note, due to the errors that will result. This chord is followed by the chord F minor, which is the relative minor of the key of A flat, with the notes F, A flat, and C. We can only read the flat notes in the key of A flat, which are the A flat, B flat, D flat, and E flat notes, but not its sharp notes due to the errors that will be produced. Next is the chord F sharp minor, which is the relative minor of the key of A, with the notes F sharp, A, and C sharp. Similarly, we can only read the sharp notes in the key of A flat, which are the F sharp, G sharp, and C sharp notes, but not its flat notes due to the errors that will be produced. Then, let's continue with the chord G minor, which is the relative minor of the key of B flat, with the notes G, B flat, and D. In the key of B flat, we can only use the two flat notes, which are the B flat and E flat notes, but not its sharp notes, A sharp and D sharp, due to the errors that will occur. Therefore, the name key of A sharp is never used. Next is the chord G sharp minor, or A flat minor, which is the relative minor of the key of B or key of C flat, with the notes G sharp, or A flat, B, or C flat, and D sharp or E flat. Although the key of B has 5 flat notes, which are the G sharp, A sharp, C sharp, D sharp, and F sharp notes, its alternate name, key of C flat, however, has 7 flat notes, which are the A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, F flat, and G flat notes. Let's continue this with the chord A minor, which is the relative minor of the key of C, with the notes A, C, and E. The key of C has no sharp nor flat notes. Next is the chord A sharp minor or B flat minor, which is the relative minor of the key of C sharp or D flat, with the notes A sharp or B flat, C sharp or D flat, and E sharp or F notes. Although the key of D flat has 5 flat notes, which are the B flat, D flat, E flat, G flat, and A flat notes, still, its alternate name, the key of C sharp, has 7 sharp notes, which are the A sharp, B sharp, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, and G sharp notes. Finally, let's continue with the chord B minor, which is the relative minor of the key of D, with the notes B, D, and F sharp. We cannot use the flat notes of the key of D because of the errors that will be produced, but only its 2 sharp notes, which are the C sharp and the F sharp. In considering all these things that we have discussed, we were able to demonstrate how the right triangle was not only transformed into an equally proportionate, righteous, and harmonious groupings in our lateral and circular formations, but it was also that the right triangle is in fact the basis or the foundation on how the chords were derived. This is why we could say that the right triangle was the origin of music. Now, let's practice those chords in the piano organ keyboard or guitar fretboard. But, at first, let's do it in the piano organ keyboard. And yet, let's put back again our table for the root major chords on the left. To continue, please like, share, and subscribe to be notified with the link.